good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. And welcome to this lovely session. And I'm excited to be chairing this session. And to start us off, allow me to introduce a man I've known for a while, an advocate of data workers, annotators, labelers, and the whole array of data workers based in Nairobi, Kenya, Ephantus Kanyugi. Ephantus is the current Vice President and Programs Manager of the Data Label Association, which is an organization which was formed by data labelers in Nairobi, Kenya. But I'm told they have plans to spread beyond just Nairobi, Kenya, where they intend to advocate for the rights of data workers, the people who sit behind our AI. And today, Ephantus is joining us, is going to give us a keynote where he is someone who has worked behind the scenes, someone with the epistemic authority over this work, someone who knows this work more than we academics can ever do. So he's going to take us through voices from Kenya's data workforce. Ephantus, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Adio. It is such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I don't take this lightly. I do have, let me share my presentation. Can everyone see it?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, so today I want us to reframe how we think about AI, not as a purely technological evolution, but as a story of human labor shaping the future of intelligence itself. So across the Middle East and Africa, a quiet revolution is underway, one which is powered not by machines but by people, whose work forms the backbone of AI systems worldwide. This presentation will draw on Kenya's experience and the work of the Data Labelers Association, I being a worker myself, but the patterns also apply across countries like Cairo, cities like Cairo, Accra, Johannesburg, and Lagos. So our focus is simple. What is happening to the workers powering AI, and what does that mean for the future of digital labor in our regions? What is data labeling? So when you talk about data labeling, we are really talking about the hidden infrastructure of AI. It's the process by which most of the AI systems that we've come to know and have come to interact with are the process that it undergoes in order to enable it to do such things. AI is like a child, and the data labeler is the person who provides the data, which teaches the child how to be able to identify things, know how to interact with things, and also know how to respond to things. And so this job mostly entails, teaching AI how to do, specific things. It's repetitive work, but it is required. It requires judgment. It requires a lot of nuance. It requires a lot of cultural understanding and emotional resilience. And because AI is expanding into every sector, you find that we have AI innovations in the health center, we have innovations in the finance sector, agriculture, and education. The demand for this form of labor is exploding. So in many ways, this labor is our region's entry point into the global AI economy. So who are the data labelers? So we've tried to, when you talk about the Data Labelers Association, we've tried to classify it into, the big silos of jobs. So the data labeler is not just an annotator. Data labeler can be a transcriptionist, can be a data collection expert. It can be a data categorization or classification expert. It can be a chat moderator, and it can also be a quality assurance agent. We did not want to leave out anybody because a lot of these people actually do jobs that are intermarried, where you find that they coexist in order to make the data process successful. Where these are people who get raw data, do things to data, and then create a specific output that will be used to train AI. Then, despite all this, despite the diversity, we mostly share most important things, they are part of a large distributed workforce that is shaping the future of machine intelligence. But then the biggest challenge is that we rarely hear their voices, yet their fingerprints are on every modern AI system. So what are the challenges that these workers face? So across the region, workers describe challenges that point to structural gaps in the digital labor ecosystem, where the first is economic precarity, where many platforms operate in ways that make earnings unpredictable. So a worker can do hours of tasks only to have them rejected without explanation. Payments may change arbitrarily. Geography-based pricing often devalues workers in Africa and in the Middle East. This is where you find that as you're working, you find, for example, that you do not have a contract, but even if you do, you're given something called an independent contract. What that means is that you only have the contract only exists for the period where you just show up for work and you're only paid for your works, but then it does not entitle you to any benefits. So there's no insurance, there's no pension, there's no bonuses, there's nothing attached to the payment. And you find that that is very intentional, where the workers, the tech companies are actually trying to evade. I have a friend who actually was about to get a baby, and so she needed to, go on maternity leave. But then because she's an independent contractor, the narrative is you go, sort yourself out for the 3 months. And then once that is done, then come back. Then probably we'll have an open slot for you. But if there's none, then we'll put you back on the waiting list for a new job. But then how do the tech companies, for example, expect this person to take care of her responsibilities if she's not being compensated for the period of time when she cannot be, say, she cannot be able to work, for example? The second one is the emotional and psychological strain. So you find that a lot of this work is often outsourced to countries in our regions, and this can expose workers to disturbing and traumatic material, where you find that, especially for people like content moderators, their work is to act as a filter between the content that is posted online and the content that people get to see. But you find that it is a lot of degrading work, where you find that these people are looking at very, very graphic and very, very emotionally draining and stressful sort of content, and this puts a mental toll on the, health of these people. You find that they actually develop conditions like PTSD, for example. Also, looking mostly on the data labeling side, you find that also the structure of work, for example, puts a lot of strain. Like I said, for example, with the contract that is a 1 month contract that is renewed every month, you find that people cannot get access, for example, to loans. You find that also the type of pay that people are getting. You find that someone in the Middle East is paid at $15 to, no, sorry, someone in the US is paid at $15 to $60 per hour. But then me in Kenya, I work for, say, 3 hours, and then for that one task that I did, for example, I get paid $0.02. It's basically 2 cents. And so we find that this disparity, where you find people are working very long hours, but then the pay is not even sufficient to cater for their basic needs, also puts a mental toll on these people. And then also keeps them in fear of the future, because, for example, if I have family, I don't want my children to get sick because I can't even afford medication. Uh, Thirdly, we have invisibility, where we find that lack of training, growth, and professional recognition, where we find that what I was doing, say, 6 years ago is the same thing I'm doing now. Tech companies do not invest in the growth and the progression of their workers. And essentially, this leaves a whole generation of workers stuck. Because, for example, I studied economics and finance and graduated in 2016. But then have been in this space since 2018, and now it's in 2024. I can't go back to what I was doing before. I can't go back to economics and finance, but then where does that leave me? And so we find that, for example, the lack of recognition of this profession as a true profession, that also poses as a big challenge for the workers. We find that we have very poor working conditions and inconsistent support systems, where you find that, for example, if you file a ticket for an issue that you faced, for example, if you're trying to submit a task but it won't submit, they're very quick to look into those kinds of issues, because that affects their production. But then when it comes to something like, for example, I wasn't paid for the week, you'll never get a response. At times you find that your account was terminated, and what they say is your account was, when it gets to payday, and then they say that your account was terminated because it violated a policy. But then this is an email that you can't respond to because it's a one-way email. So there's no recourse for any of these things that uh, you see that the workers are facing. And then we talk about weak labor protection and limited worker rights, where you find that these people, for example, say, for example, they closed my account. They were supposed to pay me, say, $100 or $200, but then they've wrongfully terminated my account. But then who can I go to get recourse for this issue that has now emerged? And so we find that the tech companies have gotten worse and worse as time goes, because they get to see that they can get away with more and more and more. And so we introduced the Data Labelers Association. So the Data Labelers Association is an association that was formed by 10 core members. And these were workers who were brought together to be able to see if they can do something about these challenges that the people are facing. This is because as we tried to look at the current landscape, we couldn't see anybody who was trying to take up this issue, trying to come up with solutions for workers. And so we decided to come together. And how this came about is we mostly were part of our research. And through this research, as we're giving stories such as a tech company, for example, asked us to provide images of children between the age of 0 and 12 years for a data collection project where they are being changed diapers, or they are doing cartwheels or things of that nature. I'm speaking about it from a perspective of, I provided the images, but because one was not very clear, they didn't pay me for the whole batch. But then as I give this story, we also get to understand that this is also a violation of children's rights. When we talk about a 1 month contract, we find that also that is a violation of human rights, because, like, according to the government of Kenya, if someone has worked for you for more than 3 months, then you were supposed to give them a permanent contract, but that was not the case. And so through this, we started to see that there were so many gaps, and we started to see that there were also ways in which the data labelers could take up this initiative and try to find solutions for some of these challenges. And so that's where the Data Labelers was founded. We officially formed in 2024, and our mission was to empower the people powering AI. And our vision was to create a fair and ethical digital labor ecosystem in which workers are respected, compensated fairly, protected from harm. And because ethical AI cannot exist without ethical labor. The main core values that we have is equity. We want everybody to be treated equally. We want transparency, we want community, and we want advocacy. So we created the DLA to advocate for fair pay, decent working conditions, protect worker rights, and promote ethical AI labor practices, provide training, skill development, and professional growth, to build a collective voice for visibility and representation, and to support worker well-being, including mental health and safety. So the DLA has come up with structures, and this is mostly where, for example, we have the DLA Connect. This is where, for example, we are part of the INDL, where we are very honored to be part of like this conference, where we get to, talk, network with people. They are able to put us in places where we, as workers, I'm a basic worker. There's nothing we could say special about me that has enabled me to be in this space, other than the fact that I am part of the Data Labelers Association and a worker. But then through the DLA Connect, we've been able to network with a lot of people, able to meet with a lot of people who share the same goals and the same ambitions of helping workers get into a better working conditions and better situations. And here, this is where we've been honored, for example, to be part of, say, the ILO conversations, where they're trying to create regulations around the digital labor space. We also have the DLA Academy, where we would like to provide upskilling opportunities for workers. And this is where we're talking about, say, things like data analysis, which is a very easy upskill for someone who's done the data labeling space, where the process of data labeling is part of the process of data analysis, for example. Then you have the DLA Health, where we want to start some mental wellness programs this has been the slowest one yet because we are looking for professionals who would like to take up this work. So it can work either two ways. So the first way is where we can find people willing to do this work pro bono, and then we can offer them as a service for free to the workers. Or alternatively, we find maybe funding, and then we can use that funding to pay for these professionals and then offer them as a service to the people. We all know that, for example, a psychiatrist is a very paying for psychiatry, for example, is very expensive. But with one of the biggest challenge being poor pay, a lot of these workers cannot afford to pay for these services. And therefore, a lot of people are living with a lot of mental challenges. And therefore, that's one of the fights that we want to take up. And then finally, we have the DLA community, where we want to bring the workers together so that they understand that they are not in isolation. We have other people facing the same challenges. We have other people who are going through the same things, and maybe by bringing them together and also doing things like the ethical, for example, the ethical AI, where you're doing the civic education to the workers, is one of our biggest goals. Because if we can have pressure from the policymakers, pressure from organizations, and then also pressure from the workers, then we might be able to get changes occurring in the sector. So our current project is the development of a code of conduct, a model contract, and a policy brief. So what we did is we came together, we interviewed 200 and it was 25, both data labelers and content moderators, listened to them, did research just to see what were the main silos of challenges that these workers were facing. And what we did is we now went and sat with other experts, which we call now the stakeholder engagements, where we came up with a document that was addressing most of the main challenges that we're facing. And one of the things that we did was we were trying to make it equitable for all parties, where, for example, if you're talking about poor pay, we understand that, for example, a tech company brought this work to Kenya because they were looking for cheap labor. So when you say that someone in the US is being paid, say, $60 an hour, we're not asking for $60 an hour. So we did a research where with an organization called the Wage Indicator, who do research on countries and figure out what is the optimum pay for someone in a specific field in a specific country, like what's the optimum pay. And so they found that pay between $3 to $5 an hour for someone working in Kenya, for example, is a good metric because this is good pay for a worker in Kenya. It's very decent. Someone can get a good job, can take your kids to a decent school, can live in a decent neighborhood, can pay for the expenses. But then that would still count as cheap labor for the tech company. And so this is what we did with all of the things that we included in the code of conduct. Then we also came up with a model contract. One of the biggest issues is that as you're signing a contract, it's usually on the company platform, and then you're only given, say, 5 minutes to sign it. And then the language that is used there is very technical. So for the common, data labeler, then it becomes very tricky for them to understand the contents of the contract. So we came up with a model contract. Then policy brief. This is where we've been coming up with policy briefs. For example, we have something called the business law amendment that was taking place where, for example, the definition of worker, for example, what should be the definition of a data worker so that it's captured in the constitution, for example, in Kenya. We're also developing training and capacity building. Like I mentioned, the upskilling that you're trying to do. So we are trying to do that. And then on top of that also, trying to come up with other different kinds of programs that you can be able to give to the workers to be able to empower them. We also have advocacy and policy collaborations where we are coming together with other organizations. For example, we have been part of the group that was trying to come up with a response to the Brown report with the ILO. We're also trying to develop mental health programs and then also doing the worker empowerment. This is where we are trying to do civic education for workers. And then for policy engagement, we actually went to several meetings and we found that a lot of the conversation was around, when you talk about regulation, it was mostly around like the taxation, for example, how do we tax these organizations? How do we make sure they invest in the country? But then the conversation about the workers was not being had. But the reason it was not being heard was because they don't know about the plight of these workers. And therefore, we took it up as an initiative to make sure that we try to involve ourselves in as many meetings with policymakers, just to make sure that they understand that there's a human aspect tied to this whole challenge that we are trying to tackle. We have a lot of partnerships and policy where we are collaborating with governments to strengthen labor protection. We are partnering with human rights groups, labor right issues. We are helping researchers. So whenever people are doing research, we are very open to helping researchers find workers so that they can provide research that can also help within this fight. And then working with academia for policy insights, and then engaging industry to promote ethical work standards. Why this matters for ethical AI? So we are trying to ensure fair labor practices contributes to more sustainable and just AI. And we are trying to, be part of as many conversations as possible, just to make sure that the human aspect of this challenge is actually addressed, and that equitable solutions can come from these conversations. We have mental health support, which reduces harm and burnout in a high-risk job. Because if the tech companies actually just decided to invest in, this job must be done, someone has to do it. And so if you are going to bring people to do these jobs, then at least provide the necessary fail stops for some of these challenges. If someone spends 8 hours looking at graphic content where they're looking at, for example, you're looking at car accidents the whole day, you're looking at people committing murder, for example, you are seeing people committing suicide, for example, then at the end of the 8-hour shift, you just don't release them and tell them to go home and see you tomorrow for the next shift. There also needs to be fail stops that the companies, for example, put in place to be able to help these workers. Therefore, this is something that we are trying to push. Then we have community empowerment, which ensures the workforce has agency and voice. And then advocacy and policy engagement can also help shape industry standards. One thing that we are trying very adamantly to push is the recognition of data labeling as a true profession. We believe that this will will allow for, for example, in the definition of a worker, for example, in the Constitution of Kenya, because it's not recognized as a true profession, then I, as a data labeler, for example, don't fit in the category of my worker. So the future vision, we are trying to grow a strong united membership. We are trying to institutionalize fair labor standards in AI chains. We're trying to influence global AI labor policies. We're trying to foster international partnerships for worker rights. And then we're also trying to advocate for mental health support in AI work. Finally, we're trying to promote transparency and accountability in AI labor. The call to action is to join us to champion for AI labor rights, support funding to improve worker conditions locally here in Kenya and globally, collaborate to share ethical AI industry standards, advocate for transparency and accountability in AI supply chains, and then lastly, empower data workers through membership and active participation. Thank you. That has been my presentation. I hope that it was insightful, and thank you for listening and for caring about the human story behind artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ephantus, for that presentation, and I'm happy that you were right on time based on our initial agreement. So, dear colleagues in the audience, this is your chance and your time for any questions, and Ephantus will happily answer our questions. So feel free to either raise your hand or type your question in the chat, and I will share with Ephantus. Okay, so while we wait for other people to ask questions, Ephantus, I can always ask questions. I think that's the privilege of being a chair, right? So my first question to you, Ephantus, is assuming what is the most immediate form of solidarity, assistance that someone can come up with or that we can offer you if you were to be asked to say, hey, here's a blank check, what do you need to make your work successful as DLA? What is it?
That's a very nice question. So if I had a blank check, first it would be community and solidarity, not just the collegiality, but intentional relationships where people check in, ask, I'm doing, and show up when things are difficult. Second, it would be to clear structures, mentorship, and access to decision makers that would help turn ideas into actual programs, research, and impact. I think one of the things that we as the data labelers have been trying to do is trying to humanize like this whole aspect. I think a lot of people think about it very, very broadly, where they are thinking about how do we change this for, the whole country, instead of thinking about what are the kind of solutions that we would have that would impact people individually. And so, for example, if we did, for example, the upskilling, I think that would be one of the biggest things that we are looking towards. The mental health program is a very important one because most of the conversation is based off of how do we improve the lives of data workers moving forward. But then a lot of people are not picking up the conversation about what should be done about the past injustices or the past harms that have been done in the past. And then the third one, I believe, would be around advocacy and creating a lot of noise around this issue that is going on in this space.
Thank you for the detailed answer, Francis. There's a question from Soren, whom I believe you've met. Soren is asking, have you thought about the possibility of creating worker-owned platforms, cooperatives, or something like that? Given that AI companies seek profits, they always try to push down your wages. So maybe efforts to democratize AI production could help improving working conditions. What do you think about that?
It is a plausible proposition. I think we are still a very young organization and still in the process of putting up systems and everything. So it's a conversation that we're not saying will not happen, but it's something that we believe can happen in the future moving forward. One thing I will say is that we are having conversations with different organizations that do provide jobs for people, and they are willing to engage with us on the uh, procedures, for example, like how do we interact with them, what would you like for the workers? And we are still having discussions like those with several organizations that would like to provide work for these workers. Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. Another question from Frida is saying, what does the career trajectory look like for data labelers, and how does the organization plan to support them? Given that most of data labelers are actually people with university degrees.
Yeah. So how a lot of people got into this space is ideally it doesn't matter what your background is. Usually you just given a test, and based on who passes the test, then that is the person who is assigned to that project. That's basically how it's been. So for example, I used to sit a table of 6 people. So there was one person at the end, another one at the end, two at this end, and two at this end. And in that table, I have studied economics and finance. Next to me was a doctor. The other one was an engineer, a lawyer. I think the other one had studied business administration, and then the last one had studied nursing. So you can see it's very, very diverse. But the problem is, for a lot of these projects, it's been a lot of people just stick to the one profession where you're just doing the data labeling just by itself. And so we find that a lot of these workers are stuck. You're just stuck. Like I said, for example, I studied economics and finance, but how do I go back into that field? There is no pathway to get back into, because for that, if I graduated in 2016, for example, some of the requirements for most of these jobs is you need to have graduated within the last 1 year, you need to have done an internship, you need to have work experience. And so we find that a lot of these workers are siloed from moving out of this profession. And it's why, for example, for us, we want to do upskilling, where we want to do other sort of careers that are related to data labeling, that a lot of these workers can be able to adjust to, and the experience that they do have will find that it is relevant. For example, data analysis.
Okay,
And
thanks. Antonio, I see your hand, but before that, there is another question which is saying, what about public policy in Kenya regarding digital labor? For example, delivery, ride-hailing apps, is the legal framework already adopted or adapted to deal with that?
absolutely not. Um, I would say like, okay, like I give an example. I saw that a tech company in the US was actually taken to court because they promised to pay people $30 an hour, but they only paid 10. But here in Kenya, we are talking about someone doing the exact same job as that person who's being paid $10. But the person did a task for 3 hours or 4 hours, but then was not even paid for that task. But then there is no recourse. So we find that a lot of these injustices are being done by the tech companies, but it is because that they can get away with it because the Kenyan law has not caught up to it. And we actually, someone was actually taken to court, one of the tech companies. And what happened was, President actually stood up at a conference. I'm saying this because it's out there in the public, and he stood up and said categorically that he would not allow, he would change the law to make sure that, for example, the tech companies are not sued in Kenya. So you can see there's a lot of disparity between the legal framework and what the tech companies are doing, and we are trying to push. For example, like the business law amendment, for example, was created essentially to kind of silo off the tech companies from being sued, but then the BPO. So the tech company gives jobs to the BPO, then the BPO hires the workers. So the intermediary, but then the law is being changed in where people can only sue the BPO, which is the intermediary, but not the tech company. But we already saw one of the tech companies actually closed their intermediary and then rebranded. So what they did was change the name and the color of the platform and then rebranded and then came back. But you see, this is a very different entity. So in that way, you find that the tech companies find themselves, able to take advantage of most of these systems. So I would say that the legal framework has not caught up to most of this, to the situation, basically.
Thank you, Francis. Antonio, you can ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Fantus. It was very, very good presentation. And I was wondering, I was watching an interview of yours, sorry, a few weeks ago, and you were mentioning something that was interesting to me. You were mentioning that in Nairobi there are 300,000 data labelers. I hope that I got that right. But I was wondering if you have more information about that estimate, knowing that sometimes putting a name is important, putting a name and a phenomenon is important, putting a number is even more important.
So the figure I gave, yes, it was around 300,000, but the figure I gave was based off of one platform where I worked as a trainer. And what would happen is for the platform, they created what they called a trainer system. I was a trainer. And so I would get paid a fixed salary. But then my job was to make sure that I had a target. So I have a meeting like this one, and I need to make sure at all times I have at least 100 people in that meeting. And it was for training. So they used to call it onboarding. And so what would happen is, so I would recruit someone, bring them on board. So for the first week, we are going through how the tool works, showing them how to go about tasking. So by the first week, they're already working. By the second week, it's now full on working. It's we are working, but working with them. So nobody submits a task before we look at it. We go through it to see if there are any errors and then correct them. And then by week 3, they're supposed to work on these tasks by themselves. But in case they have questions, they can ask me. And then by week 4, release them to work on their own. Through this system, we find that a majority of the people were not paid for the whole training period of the 4 weeks. So a lot of people would leave. But then I still have a target of 100 workers. So I'm consistently recruiting into the system. So what I said was just for me, within the 6 months of my working there, I had recruited close to, I think I had maybe 10,000 workers who had gone through my boot camp. And then we are talking about, say, another 150 trainers. all with different numbers. So just through the virtue of my experience with this platform, and then now computing it together with, doing a rough estimate of the other workers, we find that there were a lot of workers. We actually put together the list of the 10 workers who, the 10 members of the data labelers, who majority of them were the trainers. And that's where we came up with a list of about 30,000 workers. And that's why we gave an estimate of about 300,000. We wanted to do a mapping project, but that has not come yet. But yeah, that's how the estimate came about. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Francis. That's very surprising to me. I'm not sure if surprised or shocked is the right term, but I had no idea that these numbers were that much. But anyway, that said, I would like to thank you very much, Francis, for taking your time to share with us what you guys are doing at the Digital Legal Association, and we remain very supportive and very in admiration of the work that you are doing. And please keep up the good work. And thank you very much to the audience and everyone who asked a question, as well as those who took notes and listened. We value you and we appreciate you. And I will hand over now to the next chair for the next session. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this session on AI, automation, and labor transformations. My name is Rakut Fau Manufsu from ISCAM Business School, Madagascar, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chair for this session. Thank you all for joining us across different countries and time zones. So we will explore how artificial intelligence, automation, and digital platforms are reshaping labor markets in the Middle East and Africa. All four presentations offer a rich combination of economic, organizational, and sociological perspectives, highlight both opportunities and vulnerabilities as associated with digitally mediated labor. Each speaker will have 15 minutes, followed by 20-minute collective Q&A at the end of the sessions. So let me introduce you our first presenter, which is Quatar Tsuli. The title of the presentation is Technologie avancée dans le marché du travail en Égypte et en Arabie Saoudite. Dynamique et défi. Youth will be focused on how AI and automation are transforming job structures, skills, requirements. She will draw on a comprehensive literature review to show how national strategies, such as Saudi Arabia's vision and Egypt's innovation initiatives, are reshaping both formal and informal labor market. So let us begin by this presentation.
D'accord. Ok. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis très contente d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je vais essayer de partager avec vous ma présentation. J'espère que c'est bien visible, non?
Yes, it's showing on the.
Okay, I try to be. I did about it. C'est bon maintenant?
Yes.
Ok, donc la présentation est écrite en anglais, mais l'explication, je vais essayer de le lire en français. Donc, mon intervention, c'est intitulée Technologies avancées dans le marché du travail en Égypte et en Arabie Saoudite, les dynamiques et les défis. Dans un contexte mondial marqué par l'essor rapide des technologies avancées, l'Égypte et l'Arabie Saoudite se positionnent comme deux acteurs majeurs de la transition numérique au sein de la région MENA. Les réformes économiques et technologiques menées dans ces deux pays visent à moderniser leur marché du travail, dynamiser leur économie et renforcer leur compétitivité internationale. Cependant, cette mutation accélérée s'accompagne de défis importants: adaptation des compétences, intégration de la main-d'œuvre, la réduction des inégalités numériques, régulation d'un secteur informel encore significatif, surtout pour l'Égypte. Cet exposé donc analyse les principales dynamiques de développement technologique dans les deux pays, tout en mettant en lumière les enjeux socio-économiques et structurels qui conditionnent la réussite de ces transformations. Et afin de répondre à notre problématique, comment ces technologies influencent-elles le marché du travail en Égypte et en Arabie Saoudite? On propose ce plan de travail dans lequel on va voir dans la première partie l'Égypte, ses initiatives, les dynamiques et les challenges et les défis. Dans la deuxième partie, on va voir les efforts et les initiatives de l'Arabie Saoudite, ses dynamiques et aussi les risques. On va terminer avec une petite conclusion. Donc, concernant l'Égypte, l'Égypte place aujourd'hui la transformation numérique au cœur de son développement. Le gouvernement s'efforce de bâtir une économie digitale, dynamique et multipliant les réformes et les investissements stratégiques, sous l'impulsion de la stratégie digitale Égypte de 2030. Et face à une demande croissante des citoyens pour des services modernes, le pays connaît une accélération notable de sa transformation technologique. Et pour ces transformations, le ministère de technologie, des éthiques et de techniques d'information, de communication d'information, qui est chargé de cette implémentation de cette stratégie et qui pilote 10 grandes organisations pour la mise en œuvre de cette stratégie, qui connaît pas seulement la technologie complexe, mais aussi la technologie simple et complexe. Donc voilà les initiatives. Donc première initiative, c'est la vision Égypte qui est très importante de 2030, qui cherche à développer des programmes de transformation numérique, renforcer les compétences et les formations en techniques d'information et de communication, moderniser les infrastructures technologiques, faire la conception, la production des produits électroniques en Égypte et le développement des parcs technologiques. Il y a aussi une autre initiative, c'est notre avenir numérique, qui cherche à former 100 000 jeunes dans les domaines à forte demande, comme la conception des sites web, l'analyse des données et le marketing digital. Il y a aussi l'initiative Notre opportunité numérique, c'est pour l'entrepreneuriat, pour le soutien des petits moyens entreprises et pour mettre en œuvre une connexion de 5300 bâtiments gouvernementaux à la fibre optique. Il y a aussi les villes intelligentes, qui est un projet ambitieux, ce qui s'appelle New Administration Capital. C'est pour construire des pôles technologiques et administratifs, pour la gestion urbaine et pour les services publics digitalisés, et améliorer la qualité de vie des habitants. Et aussi, il y a un autre pôle de mes projets, qui est l'éducation. C'est pour soutenir l'innovation, l'éducation de high-tech. Et aussi l'entrepreneuriat pour les startups et pour les jeunes qui ont des projets ambitieux pour les e-commerce et l'entrepreneuriat de technologie. Il y a aussi les infrastructures, c'est comme les parcs technologiques, surtout dans les 5 régions de Menfia, Minaya, Mansoura, Sohag et Kina et Aswan. C'est pour soutenir aussi l'innovation et les startups. Il y a aussi le projet de connectivité de haut débit, c'est le déploiement de la 5G qui était commencé cette année en 2025 et mise en place cette année et commencé. Donc c'est pour attirer les investissements étrangers qui cherchent à avoir un lieu où il y a des meilleures connectivités à un haut débit. Aussi, il y a le Centre national de contrôle de surveillance d'éthique qui cherche à travailler à ce des niveaux. Le premier niveau, c'est pour les villes, pour moderniser les réseaux mobiles le long de deux grandes axes routières et dans les zones stratégiques du pays. Et de l'autre côté, c'est pour les villages, pour améliorer les télécommunications de les villages par les fibres optiques, Internet, les antennes de relais, et les distributeurs automatiques. Maintenant, en passant à les dynamiques et les opportunités créées par ces initiatives. Première chose, il y a l'adoption massive du digital. Donc, en Égypte, il y a plus de 375 millions de transactions numériques qui étaient enregistrées en 2022. Il y a aussi une hausse des signatures électroniques et diminution des frictions de paiement, ce qui montre qu'il y a une acceptation, qu'il y a une tendance pour la population égyptienne d'utiliser plus la technologie et suivre la tendance mondiale. Il y a aussi des paiements digitaux en forte croissance, portefeuille électronique, les Instaplay, etc. Et aussi, il y a concernant les comportements des consommateurs. Donc, en 2025, il y a une observation que 15% des Égyptiens achètent en ligne quotidiennement. Par contre, en 2020, il y a seulement 4% des personnes qui achètent en ligne quotidiennement. Il y a aussi une croissance de B2B en e-commerce. B2B, c'est comment dire en e-commerce, c'est business to business, c'est entre entreprise et entreprise au grossiste. En avant, il y a déjà un marché de e-commerce qui est très bien dans l'Égypte, qui est B2C, c'est business to customer, c'est entre entreprise et consommateur. Mais maintenant, il y a cette augmentation de ces e-commerce, de business to business qui est qui montre qu'il y a un nouveau marché d'approvisionnement en Égypte qui s'augmente. Troisième opportunité, pour les petites et moyennes entreprises et les micro-entreprises. Donc, des nombreuses petites et moyennes entreprises adoptent le numérique, le e-commerce, stimulant la création d'emplois technologiques qui demandent de plus en plus des profits qui peuvent répondre à ces technologies avancées. Il y a aussi le 67% des petites et moyennes entreprises, mais sur les paiements digitaux pour booster leur croissance. Et aussi, l'Égypte parmi les trois premiers pays MENA pour les startups. Il y a plus de 600 startups soutenues par les projets des initiatives de l'Égypte. Et il y a aussi plus de 2000 startups technologiques qui existent déjà. Pour cette partie, il y a la croissance des secteurs TIC, qu'on peut remarquer qu'il y a une valeur des transactions numériques qui a passé de 6,6 milliards de dollars en 2017 à 18 milliards en 2023. Il y a aussi une croissance du secteur des TIC qui est de plus de 15,2% et une contribution importante de ce secteur au PIB qui estime à 5,8% en 2023 et 2024. Il y a aussi beaucoup d'investissements étrangers qui soutenissent ce genre d'investissement en Égypte. Il y a 297 milliards de dollars en 2024, ce qui classe l'Égypte parmi les 5 pays africains pour l'investissement technologique. Aussi, il y a un haut débit et meilleure infrastructure Internet qui ont été installées dans le cadre des initiatives d'Égypte numérique 2030, qui sont déjà installées depuis 2018. Il y a aussi des investissements dans les infrastructures, dans les formations et les services numériques. Et aussi, il y a un grand potentiel économique parce que le marché de e-commerce estime à 10,24 milliards de dollars en 2025, ce qui pouvait même, il y a des lectures qui disent que même ça peut atteindre 9,8 milliards de dollars en 2030. Il y a aussi une base solide grâce à l'augmentation des utilisateurs à Internet et smartphones qui pouvaient, vous regarder ça dans l'image qui existe dans le slide, c'est qui montre qu'il y a plus d'utilisation d'Internet Et même le temps qui passe, les citoyens égyptiens en utilisant l'Internet, ça dépasse 16 heures par jour. Aussi, l'utilisation des données mobiles a été augmentée. Même aussi, les appels et les trafics internationaux ont été augmentés ces dernières années. Par contre, il y a des défis et des risques, surtout pour les moyens et petites moyennes entreprises, parce que pour l'installation des outils numériques, il y a des coûts élevés qui doivent supporter et souvent ces petites moyennes entreprises ne peuvent pas parce que il y a un nombre important qui travaillent dans l'informel. Ça, c'est que pas ce problème. Aussi pour avoir des personnes qualifiées. Donc, ça demande aussi de coûts. C'est pour l'installation et aussi pour avoir des personnels. Aussi l'accès limité au financement digital parce que le nombre des petites moyennes entreprises, ça dépasse aussi le nombre des initiatives ou de nombre des entreprises qui peuvent bénéficier de financement. Donc, il y a plus de nombre d'entreprises que le nombre de financements disponibles. Aussi, il y a un bon nombre de ces entreprises travaillent dans l'informel, donc ne peuvent pas ni bénéficier des crédits, ni de bénéficier de financement de l'État. Il y a aussi usage restreint des systèmes avancés qui demandent aussi de capital humain et de matériel. Aussi l'adoption inégale selon zones urbaines et rurales. Donc, il y a cette fracture numérique parce que dans les zones rurales, il y a moins d'Internet, moins des antennes de relais et donc cette inégalité rurale. Deuxième défi, c'est compétences et formation. Donc, il y a déjà manque de compétences digitales de base. Donc, il y a un analphabétisme numérique pour plus de 56% de la population. Donc, ça pose aussi un problème. C'est pour la digitalisation, les initiatives et les programmes ambitieux de l'Égypte. Il y a aussi formation, généralement, même si il imagine que l'Égypte a pu faire une formation, etc., pour le développement de personnel. Mais cette formation ne peut pas garantir l'amélioration des conditions de vie pour les travailleurs égyptiens. Donc, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de personnes qui n'ont pas les couvertures sociales, etc. Donc, c'est encore en jeu. Et aussi l'adaptation insuffisante des compétences face à la automatisation et l'intelligence artificielle, surtout dans l'informel et à cause de l'alphabétisme numérique qui connaît l'Égypte. Il y a un autre secteur qui est l'informel. C'est ça parmi les grands problèmes parce qu'en 2020, il y a 66,7% des travailleurs non agricoles étaient dans l'emploi informel. Et en 2023-2022, le secteur privé informel génère 82% de la production du secteur privé. Donc, c'est qui contribue vraiment à la PIB et vraiment, c'est la base de l'économie égyptienne. Donc, il y a aussi des problèmes et défis pour l'État, c'est les fiscalisations, les régulations, la protection sociale et la planification économique. Ok, je pense. Ok. Je pense, j'ai déjà parlé de cela, j'ai pas parlé. Ok. Donc, pour la technologie et les inégalités, il y a l'intelligence artificielle peut améliorer la productivité, mais on ne garantit pas de revenus stables ni de protection sociale. J'ai parlé de ce point, mais parce qu'il y a déjà beaucoup de stratégies ambitieuses pour cela, mais reste encore des problèmes sociaux que l'État égyptien doit prendre en considération dans son stratégie. Il y a aussi beaucoup de travailleurs informels qui sont moins remplacés par l'automatisation, mais sont restent vulnérables. Et il y a aussi les risques d'exacerbation de la précarité et des faibles salaires. Si vraiment l'Égypte a pu développer cette stratégie, mais il n'y a pas des formations, il n'y a pas des projets pour les personnes moins qualifiées, ça va rester un problème pour l'Égypte. Aussi, il y a l'alphabétisme qui freine la stratégie de numérisation. Il y a le financement limité de la recherche scientifique et technologique, ce qui pose aussi un problème parce qu'il y a vraiment, ils ont fait beaucoup d'efforts, mais ça reste aussi insuffisant pour suivre le développement technologique rapide qui connaît le monde. Il y a aussi l'inégalité en termes de genre entre les femmes et les hommes en matière d'éducation, surtout dans les domaines qui est technologique et de mathématiques de la, et de l'ingénierie. Il y a plus d'hommes que des filles. Et aussi, il y a cette question de la migration, parce que aussi il y a la question de la migration du brain drain des Égyptiens, donc il y a fouille des compétences et ceux qui peuvent limiter vraiment ce développement. Maintenant, on va passer au Saudi Arabia. Donc, l'Arabie saoudite poursuit une stratégie ambitieuse de digitalisation portée par la vision 2030, visant à diversifier l'économie, à renforcer le rôle des technologies de l'information et de la communication. Le pays investit massivement dans des infrastructures numériques, e-gouvernement, fintech et smart cities, tout en stimulant l'innovation et l'entrepreneuriat technologique. Pour faire cette vision, donc l'organisation cherchée, c'est le ministère des Communications et des Technologies de l'Information. Donc maintenant, on va voir les initiatives faites par l'Arabie saoudite.
Sorry, you have 1 minute to remain. You have 1 minute to remain. Okay.
Okay, I
Vous
try
avez,
to
vous
respect the
pouvez
time.
passer directement à la conclusion, s'il vous plaît.
Ok, désolé, mais bon, ok. Je vais essayer de respecter le temps, mais bon. Ok. Pour l'Égypte, donc il y a généralement la stratégie nationale, ce qui vise la diversification économique, la digitalisation et l'adoption des technologies avancées. Il y a aussi la création de la Saudi Data, qui est responsable de la pilotage de cette stratégie en pratique. Il y a dans l'objectif de former 20 000 spécialistes en intelligence artificielle afin de garantir des postes hautement qualifiés d'ici 2030, mais surtout pour remplacer les personnes migrantes hautement qualifiées qui existent en Arabie saoudite en remplaçant par les autochtones. Deuxième aspect de cette initiative, c'est les formations. Donc, il y a beaucoup de programmes de formation publique et privée aussi des universités qui offrent aussi des offres d'incubateurs et des bourses pour suivre la formation, aussi pour faire des startups, etc. Et pour les gens qui ont des idées innovatrices. Troisième point, c'est l'innovation.
S'il vous plaît, pour que l'on puisse avoir une certaine égalité, égalité pour les for presenters, vous pouvez passer
Parce
tout de
qu'il
suite
y a
à la
beaucoup de choses.
conclusion.
Ok.
Oui, oui,
Ok.
de toute façon, on aura les rendus pour chaque présentation et on aura
Ok.
l'opportunité d'apprécier
Je
vos
sais pas si
travaux
j'ai déjà
à
dépassé.
travers ces rendus. Oui, oui, vous avez
Ok.
déjà dépassé le temps
Ok.
pour la
Ok. D'accord.
présentation, s'il vous plaît.
Mais bon, juste.
Merci.
Ok. Merci à
Merci.
vous. Merci à
Merci.
vous. Bon.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. We now move to our second speaker, Bouziane from Université Chouaib Tougali. The presentation will be focusing on a case study exploring the impact of ChatGPT on internal audit quality with a Moroccan oil group subsidiary, focusing on analytical performance, reporting quality, and involving professional skills. Dear intervenant,
Yes, hello.
you may begin when ready.
Yes, I'm ready. So, is it, you can see my screen?
Okay. Okay,
Yes
it's okay.
or no? Okay,
Yes,
okay.
okay.
So, hello everyone. So, I'm here today to present my research titled The Impact of Using ChatGPT on Internal Audit Quality, based on a study conducted at a subsidiary of an oil group in Morocco. So, to start, we'll start by setting the context. We live in an era of digital transformation that has profoundly impacted every sector, not just technology, including audit functions. So organizations are modernizing their working methods by adopting new technological tools, and these tools provide three major benefits. First, increasing efficiency. Second, improving detection of fraud. And third, it's enhancing organizational competitiveness. So this is why auditing functions and auditing firms have been quick to adopt these innovations. However, internal audit faces real challenges. Modern internal audit missions are becoming increasingly complex for two main reasons. First, there is the high volume of operation. We're talking about sales, about purchases, about payroll assets, and many other transaction type happening continuously. Second, there is the diversity of flows, import and export, international transaction, etc. The solution, as we can see in the screen, artificial intelligence offers an effective response to all these challenges. AI-based tools enable fast and accurate data analysis, automation of repetitive tasks, and improved reliability of controls. Among these AI tools, ChatGPT stands out because of its versatility and linguistic capabilities, which is especially valuable in multilingual environments like our case study. So for our research question, all these contexts bring us to the core of our research. The growing use of ChatGPT in internal audit functions raises a fundamental question: to what extent does ChatGPT assistance influence the quality of internal audit missions? Our literature review presents a clear picture across 3 dimensions. First, the role of internal audit. Internal audit's primary mission is to ensure the integrity and reliability of financial information. However, in large organizations with high volume, complex transaction, this becomes increasingly challenging. This is well documented in Zhang 2019 work. Also, our literature review tackled the opportunities gained from AI. Also, we have discussed and studied a lot of empirical findings. But there are risks, of course. There are risks, especially data privacy and security concerns, and the need for robust governance and training. For our research methodology, so we will ask, why did we choose a subsidiary of an oil group in Morocco for this case study? Here is the logic. First of all, internal auditing requires mastering multiple complex business processes. A global subsidiary adds extra layers of complexity: multilingual communication, cross-border operation, technical terminology, especially in the oil domain, and international partners. This Moroccan oil subsidiary represented an ideal context to analyze how ChatGPT could help auditors overcome these specific challenges: language barriers, technical complexity, and procedural challenges across border, as I said before. So for the sample selection, so we studied 23 internal auditors from the Moroccan oil company subsidiary. Here is how they are. 80% hold a master's degree or higher, 41 are women, and 78% have more than 4 years of experience in the same group. This was a small group, of course, but a highly qualified sample of professionals, which actually makes our study findings more credible, because these aren't new recruits. They have significant experience with audit processes. So I think for our variable, yes, we gathered that data on multiple variables to understand ChatGPT's impact. Here is what we measured. First, the explanatory phase. We conduct structured interviews with 3 auditors to understand the context. So a lot of variables was studied, such as the demographic factor, the technology factors, ICT familiarity, ChatGPT use, translation of audit documents, report writing, risk management support, concept explanation, and other variables. So for our data collection and analysis, so we distributed a questionnaire to all 23 auditors and achieved 100% response rate. We obtained informed consent from all participants and from the organization. For the data analysis, we used space statistical software to analyze the data. We applied linear regression analysis to test the relationship between how useful auditors perceive ChatGPT, how easy it was to use, and the actual impact on audit quality. So for our results, as you see, we had the correlation index near to 1 and precisely 0.98. We had an F statistics less than 5% and DW equal to 2.2. So we can say in general that this statistical method is legitimate and we can use it to test the relationship between all variables that I've talked about and the audit quality. So for our result, as you can see, we have some variables that they don't have any impact on the audit quality, but we do have other variables that have a strong positive relationship between them and the audit quality. So for the discussion, the main finding that we confirmed a strong correlation between audit quality and ChatGPT. Assisted work, particularly in multilingual audit context, the model's reliability is solid, and the statistics confirm, as I said, this result. So ChatGPT enhances efficiency. It speeds up translation of complex audit documents. And ChatGPT improve consistency, reduces linguistic inconsistencies across multilingual documents. It reduces the translation errors that could lead to misinterpretations, and every document is processed using the same AI model, ensuring uniformity. So AI ChatGPT increases audit quality, better accuracy in understanding cross-border transactions, faster turnaround and on audit reports, and auditors can focus on risk and compliance issues that require judgment. But the human element remains essential. For our recommendation based on these findings, we recommended 6 concrete actions for organizations. The first is smart use of AI tools. Second is to improve digital skills, use a hybrid audit approach, improve collaboration, continuous quality control, and also foster innovation and research. And in conclusion, we can say that our research demonstrates that ChatGPT, when properly integrated, significantly improves internal audit quality, particularly in complex multilingual environment like our case study organizations. However, the key word is properly integrate with human oversight, with professional verification as a tool to augment, not replace auditor experience, and with governance and ongoing training. So the future of internal audits isn't AI replacing auditors, it's auditors empowered by AI to do better, faster, and more accurate work. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you for this clear and stimulating contributions. Our third presentation is by Judith from ActionAid, Nigeria. So she will discuss feminist futures of digital labor and democracy in Africa, examining how digital and AI enabled labor systems intersect with gender equality and political participation. Judith, the microphone is yours. Judith?
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay. we can share.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll just go straight into the presentation itself. Across Africa, we can see that AI and the digital platforms are actually transforming how we work. Not just how we work, but it also transforms how we live and also to the extent of how we are being governed. But then, if you look at it, these shifts are actually, they carry deep gendered implications. And what my presentation is all about is trying to walk us through a feminist political economy lens that actually helps us to understand both the risks and the transformative possibilities of AI, especially as it affects African women and also marginalized communities. For my introduction, I would start by saying that like I've mentioned already before, that digitalization is actually advancing rapidly. We have platform work, data annotation, content moderation, gig work, and the likes. And at the same time, the governments are rolling out digital IDs, biometrics, and AI-driven decision systems. And this actually mainstream policy debates actually talk about the future of work and then also looks at job loss. But feminist scholars have asked deeper questions as to who actually benefits, who bears the burden, and how do these systems actually reinforce long-standing inequalities. And this presentation would actually offer a feminist Pan-African reframing for that. So let's just do a deep dive into the context itself. We can see that automation narratives paint AI as an unstoppable force that would simply eliminate jobs. But feminist and political economy scholars have shown that labor crises come from capitalism, and they also come from austerity and decades of underinvestment, not just from technology itself. AI doesn't replace labor, it recognizes and hides it. We can say also that women, especially in the global south, perform the invisible micro labor behind AI, which is the annotation, moderation, transcription. The job disruption narrative becomes a disciplinary tool that would normalize precarity. The next point is on feminist political economy and digital platform work. On this, I would look at it from the standpoint that platform work looks flexible. It also looks like empowering and also entrepreneurial. But the reality is more complicated. Algorithms actually manage workers, set prices, and discipline behavior, and then it blurs the employment boundaries that are surrounded around it. Women are channeled into the lowest paid, most precarious tasks, often because these fits around unpaid care responsibilities, which is also we can look at that under social reproduction. So instead of empowerment and platformization can actually deepen time poverty and economic insecurity. A feminist lens will now show that these inequalities are not just accidents, but they are built into the design of digital labor markets. Now, looking at the algorithmic, rhythmic governance, techno empires, and African digital states. One of the things I would say here is that beyond labor, AI is actually reshaping governance itself. African states are adopting digital ID, biometrics, like we have mentioned in the introductions, and also automated social protection tools, which are often funded by donors and tech corporations. A feminist geopolitics perspective helps us to see these systems as part of modern technology empires. They are structures that reproduce colonial hierarchies through digital infrastructures. So while these technologies promise inclusion, if care is not taken, they often exacerbate exclusion, especially for women who are lacking documentation or facing household level power constraints. The next one as well is networked feminism and digital activism. Under these, we can see that digital spaces are not only sites of harm, they are also spaces of feminist resistance. We've seen different movements that have cut across countries, specifically focused more on Africa. We've seen the NSAS, they shut it all down, fees must fall. We show how African youth and feminists actually were able to mobilize online and to challenge state violence and patriarchal systems. They've networked feminism. They've described how activists use digital tools to build solidarity and digital sisterhood. But this activism is labor intensive, emotionally taxing, and vulnerable to harassment and surveillance. And then digital activism works here, but it works with infrastructures that weren't designed actually for justice. And another aspect you can look at is the feminist democratic theory and governance spaces. This would see that feminist democratic theory pushes us to rethink participation. It pushes us to look at it that inclusion is not just about adding women into the room, it's about restructuring the room itself. We need multiple participation spaces, formal, be it formal, be it informal, and or maybe even democratic. We can say that the idea of governable spaces reminds us that digital infrastructure can be governed collectively, not just by corporations itself. Now, what are the theoretical frameworks that was used? Our theoretical lens actually connects four strands. We're looking at it from the feminist political economy, which exposes the gendered labor behind AI. We're looking at feminist geopolitics, which situates Africa digitalization within power structures. We're looking at networked feminism, which highlights digital activism and embodied resistance. We're also seeing, of course, the fourth one, which is feminist democratic theory, which guides how we can actually build democratic digital systems. Then I would go straight to see the methodology. This was actually a conceptual and theoretical paper. It's important to note, and I would go down to the findings. For the first findings, we have the AI. We have the AI reorganizes and disciplines feminized labor, which looks at AI restructures and intensifies work instead of simplifying it. We also see that so what I'm actually basically saying there is that AI does not simply replace labor. It reorganizes it in gendered ways. Women end up performing the invisible tasks that sustain AI systems under precarious conditions. The second finding is looking at that algorithmic governance systems marketed as inclusive often reproduce old inequalities. Women face documentation barriers, biometric failures, safety risks, and disproportionate surveillance itself. Then the other finding is that feminist digital activism and democratic innovation offer real possibilities. They actually show that alternative socio-technical futures are actually possible, but activism alone cannot overturn the deep capitalist and patriarchal logic which are embedded in digital infrastructure. So structural change requires policy, governance, and redistributive justice itself. And of course, And of course, the last finding, which also looks at recognizing. So the last finding, which is that feminist digital activism and democratic innovation offer real possibilities. This is what I've mentioned before. In conclusion, I would say that in conclusion, I would say the future of digital labor and democracy in Africa is not predetermined. AI actually can actually deepen hierarchies, or it can help us build feminist, democratic, caring digital societies. Whether AI becomes a tool of domination or liberation, it depends on policy choices, it depends on political organizing, and also it's strongly also depends on feminist struggles. So a feminist future of AI is possible, but it must be actively constructed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. We now move to our final presenter, Saadedine Igamani from Sidi Mohammed bin Abdullah University. The title of the presentation is Flexibility or Precarity, a sociological inquiry into platform drivers in Morocco. So, Saadedine, if you're ready, you can go ahead. Saadedine?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to and happy to be part of this webinar. My name is Saadini Gaman, professor of sociology at the Faculty of Letters and Human Science in Fez, Morocco. I'm very pleased to take part in this webinar and to present the key findings of my work on transport platform labor in Morocco. As suggested in the title, this research highlights a dual reality. This kind of work can offer flexibility, but it can also produce a significant precarity. The outcome really depends on several factors, especially the driver's socio-economic profile and the personal circumstances. My presentation follows a simple structure. I will begin with an introduction to the gig economy and the case of InDrive, focusing particularly on its presence in Morocco and the legal framework surrounding it. Then I will briefly present the theoretical framework before moving on to the research design, methodology, and fieldwork. After that, I will share the key findings and show how precarity manifests in practice for InDrive drivers. Finally, I will conclude with a discussion of implications and the perspectives for future research. The gig economy has been expanding rapidly in developing countries such as Morocco. We see platformization across many sectors, delivery services, ride hailing, domestic services, etc. And company like Careem, Uber, and now InDrive have entered the Moroccan market. However, the legal framework has not kept pace with this expansion. Despite the need for these services to address unemployment, for example, and to compensate for the weaknesses of urban transport, the regulatory system remains unclear. Generally, gig economy jobs offer flexibility, especially because they involve short-term engagement and the digital mediation. InDrive is a multinational platform operating in many countries. In 2023, it achieved the 1660 million worldwide and became the top application in 13 countries. In Morocco, InDrive has grown rapidly, attracting many former taxi drivers around 13% in 2024 because of its low cost and flexible model. It's especially competitive for intracity and intercity transport thanks to its negotiation-based pricing. The difficulty in Morocco is that the legal framework is not adapted. Although the company advertise publicly, include on TV advertising during Ramadan 2025, drivers using the application are still considered informal or even illegal. It's enough to own a car to register on the application and start working. No authorization from the Ministry of Transport is required. This has generated multiple problems, regulatory uncertainty, conflict with the taxi driver, former taxi driver, and the legal taxi drivers, and the risk for workers. But the theoretical framework for this study focuses on precarious work, characterized by lack of social protection, unstable contract, weak job security, the legal capacity to protect oneself professionally. Some drivers succeed in increasing their earnings by working long hours and completing many trips. But the main issue is income instability. Daily earnings can vary widely depending on competition, demand, and fuel prices. This makes long-term planning difficult and reinforces financial vulnerability. Methodologically, this study is based on participant observation. I conducted 15 rides in the Rabat region as a client. During each ride, I observed the driver's profile, the vehicle's condition, and I engaged in informal. I'm engaged in the informal discussions. All ethical considerations were respected: the consent, anonymity, and confidentiality. The findings highlight the strong variation among drivers. Drivers who own their cars have much better conditions than those renting vehicles. Flexibility increases when the activity is a secondary job, when drivers have a stable primary income, or when they have no heavy family and the financial responsibilities. But for unemployed individuals, people paying car loans, or those supporting families, the same job becomes highly precarious. There is an urgent need to adapt the legal framework, especially as Morocco prepares to host the 2030 World Cup, event that will dramatically increase mobility demands. The main advantages of in-drive work include flexible hours and a form of entrepreneurial autonomy. However, the risk remains considerable. No social protection, income volatility, conflict with authorities and the taxi drivers, and unsustainable working conditions for many. In conclusion, to conclude, understanding gig workers' resilience require examining how they cope with income volatility and job-related challenges. And many in-drive drivers rely on WhatsApp groups to warn each other about unsafe areas, share experiences, and coordinate strategies, forming a kind of collective resistance and resilience. This study highlights both the opportunities and the vulnerabilities of platform work in Morocco, and points to the urgent need to adapt the regulation. And concerning the presence or the absence of female drivers, we have just rare in the field, in the reality, due to the socio-cultural constraints, safety concerns, and social norms that make this work less accessible to women. Those who do participate tend to focus on safer routes for some female drivers, focus on just safe routes, and such as airport schedules, where the perceived risks are lower and the clientele more predictable. Voilà. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank
And
you.
excuse my English.
Okay, it's okay. Thank you. And uh, thank you, Sadedin. And thank you to all for presenters for these excellent contributions. We now open the floor to our question and answer session. But Bouziane had to leave the conference due to thesis defense. But you have, if you have questions about his presentation, you can send your questions to his email inbox, which will be given in the discussion thread. So the first question is from Cosimo to Tsuli, to Kautar Tsuli. The question is, you have shown how Egypt and to a minor extent Saudi Arabia are developing the economic and technological infrastructure for AI through tech investment. But how does labor compare in both countries? How are these countries addressing the labor that uses AI? And what are they doing to develop the labor needed to produce AI, like data labeling? In French, vous avez montré comment l'Égypte et l'Arabie Saoudite développent. Oui, vous avez montré comment l'Égypte et puis l'Arabie Saoudite ont développé une infrastructure économique et technologique. Mais comment le travail se compare-t-il entre les deux pays? Comment ces pays génèrent-ils le travail qui utilise l'IA? So, oui, yes, Tsuli, si vous pouvez apporter des réponses à ces questions. Oui, oui, yes, you can give an answer.
J'ai vu le slide parce que j'ai déjà expliqué ça. Donc, les prévisions, c'est pour implémenter la force parce qu'on parle des pays en voie de développement. Ce ne sont pas vraiment des pays développés. Donc,
please, s'il vous plaît, on ne vous entend pas très bien. Est-ce que vous êtes en déplacement? On vous entend mal, s'il vous plaît.
Ok, vous m'entendez d'abord? Allô?
Oui, oui, ça, c'est OK. It's OK.
Moi, je suis dans l'arrêt, donc désolée, c'est pour cette raison parce que j'ai un cours. OK, donc je ne sais pas s'il a déjà vu les slides parce qu'on parle de pays comme l'Arabie Saoudite ou l'Égypte, c'est un pays en voie de développement. Donc, c'est pour l'utilisation de l'intelligence artificielle. C'est pour cette raison que j'ai mis des slides sur les initiatives et les opportunités. Donc, il y a d'abord des infrastructures qui sont mises en place. C'est pour préparer la nouvelle génération à l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, c'est tout un effort des infrastructures, des formations. On parle aussi de l'enseignement. J'ai déjà mentionné qu'il y a une différence. Il y a moins de formations dans l'intelligence artificielle oui, il y a une augmentation du nombre des genres de formation, mais il y a encore un travail à faire. Donc, ces deux pays essaient, par leur stratégie, leur politique publique, de développer, de préparer les pays à des vagues de l'intelligence artificielle. Donc, il y a des startups qui sont créées pour soutenir ça. Il y a des formations, il y a des financements, les infrastructures. On parle de 5G qui était généralisé en Égypte en 2025 et aussi en Arabie Saoudite, ça fait, je pense, c'est déjà à partir de 2019. Donc, c'est tout un travail qui est fait ces deux pays pour préparer leur pays et leurs citoyens à ces nouvelles vagues. J'espère que j'ai répondu. Si je n'ai pas bien compris, je peux approfondir plus.
Okay. Okay, Paula, you can ask your question, Paula.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question for the last presenter, Sadedin. There's something that you showed that there are quite a few students among the drivers. And yeah, I wanted to ask if you know more about the specific profiles of these students. I assume they drive to pay for their studies. I mean, they probably take it as a student job. But yeah, is there anything specific about those drivers who are also students?
Thank you very much for this question. Je vais essayer de répondre en français s'il n'y a pas de problème, bien sûr. Donc, concernant les étudiants, donc il y a beaucoup d'étudiants qui essaient de balancer entre vie estudiantine et également travail. Et surtout, ils trouvent que ce travail permet la flexibilité. Donc, il y a la possibilité de manager leur agenda, leurs cours, etc. Donc, les horaires qu'ils ont pour travailler en tant que transporteur. Donc, nous, comme j'ai dit, au Maroc, c'est un peu informel. Donc, même si donc, il y a cette entreprise qui est là, on fait de la publicité dans les panneaux d'affichage et également, comme j'ai dit, à la TV. Et donc, il est normalement légalement établi. Mais lorsque il va engager les gens, donc ils vont avoir un statut soit d'auto-entrepreneur ou bien ils peuvent seulement avoir une voiture et donc s'inscrire sur la plateforme et donner certains documents. Et par la suite, ils peuvent commencer à travailler. Et donc, j'ai trouvé cette catégorie des étudiants donc, qui essaient surtout de financer leurs études. Et donc, ça a permis cette flexibilité pour eux. Donc, lorsque je parle des problèmes concernant la protection sociale, donc ils ne sont pas concernés par ça. Donc, pour eux, c'est la petite somme qu'ils ont et c'est qu'ils peuvent avoir à partir de ce travail. Ils n'ont pas besoin de protection sociale parce qu'ils l'ont au niveau de l'université et également parce que seulement ils cherchent à quoi financer leurs études. Et donc, c'est surtout les garçons. Pour les filles, donc, c'est pas possible, comme j'ai dit, parce qu'il y a la culture, une femme qui conduit un taxi, ici au Maroc, c'est pas répandu et moins lorsque c'est dans l'informel. Donc, c'est très risqué. Donc, il y a un projet d'article que j'essaie d'écrire qui va faire le focus sur cette catégorie d'étudiants. Donc, j'aurai le plaisir et l'honneur de le partager avec vous ultérieurement. Merci.
Thank you. Further questions, please? Antonio, you can ask your question,
Yes.
Antonio.
Thank you very much, Manu. So my question is for Judith Dagidi. I'm afraid that there was a little problem with the slides, so forgive me if my question will actually address something that you were already tackling in your presentation. My question concerns basically the differences between different countries when it comes to the underlying labor of AI. We have an increasing amount of data from Kenya, but we know relatively little about Nigeria. And I was wondering, apart from your feminist angle, if you do have any points of comparison between those two countries. We also know that several workers in Kenya come from Nigeria. So there is also an issue of migration that intersects with the feminist issues that you rightly raised. Thank you.
Judith?
Okay. Yeah, I can. So yes, there's actually there are documented difference actually between Kenya and Nigeria, and you're highly right about the migration. Both are actually major AI hubs in Africa. But their ecosystem, their labor structures, and also I would say the state frameworks and maybe the global integration actually differs a lot. I think that's just the angle I'll put it to. That's although both of them are AI hubs in Africa, especially for instance, looking at it from Lagos, Nigeria, and also Nairobi in Kenya, but you would see that there's a difference a bit in the ecosystem, the structure of the labor itself, the state frameworks, and also the global integration. So that's where the difference actually really come from. I could say that, for instance, if you're looking at the ecosystem itself, Kenya is actually globally recognized as one of the most consolidated centers for AI data labor in the global south. And then if you look at it for Nigeria has a much larger population of micro workers, but the work is either highly informal or they are largely remote. So those are some of the examples I could just give to respond to that.
Is it okay, Antonio?
Yes, thank you very much. It was very clear.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Judith. Another questions, please? Okay, so Miriam Raymond, you can ask your question.
My question is to Kautar regarding two things. First of all, what is the justification? I don't know if she's hearing me, but she's connected. What is the justification of the choice of Egypt and Saudi Arabia, and what is the methodology or metric that let her choose the two countries in particular in the region? Having read a lot of journal, press, the media pieces, makes sense coming from Egypt that there are initiatives for AI and upskilling and so on. But still, how do we position Egypt and Saudi Arabia? And against which metrics? I'm curious. The second thing is in the initiatives regarding labor and upskilling and so on, from what I know is that there are national strategies and programs and for digital platform labor, but there are also NGO programs and there are private sector programs. Did you consider comparing the programs together? Because I believe that where the program is coming from, would make a lot of difference in the quality of the program delivered and its impact. I don't know. I was wondering if you looked at something like this or not.
Ah, ok. Je peux répondre?
Bien sûr.
OK.
Oui, oui.
OK.
Pour le choix de l'Égypte, parce que l'Égypte, premièrement, c'est un pays d'Afrique du Nord. En même temps, ça fait partie du Moyen-Orient. Et que là, c'est le cinquième pays parmi les investissements des technologies en Afrique. Et de plus, ok. Parmi les premiers pays de l'Afrique du Nord, etc., qui ont déjà implémenté le 5G. Il y a beaucoup de progrès par rapport à d'autres pays. Aussi, si on parle de l'Arabie Saoudite, c'est un pays qui est classé première dans le monde arabe en matière des projets, etc., de l'intelligence artificielle, d'automatisation et tout. Et le 14e au niveau mondial. Donc, je me suis dit, si on parle de l'Afrique du Nord, on peut choisir le pays qui est à peu près, qui fait beaucoup d'efforts, qui a un avancement quand même, c'est l'Égypte par rapport aux autres pays, au Maroc, etc., etc., selon quelques apports que j'ai lus. Et aussi pour l'Arabie Saoudite, c'est un pays du Golfe, etc., qui fait partie de l'autre groupe des régions de MENA et qui est vraiment un pays qui fait beaucoup, beaucoup de projets à son niveau. Je me suis dit, pourquoi pas comparer les deux, mais puisque j'ai pas pu vraiment terminer la présentation parce qu'à la fin, il y a une conclusion qui fait les points sur ces... Et c'est comme une petite réponse à cette question. Mais bon, c'est pas grave. Et pour les rapports, oui, j'ai lu dans les initiatives, ouais, j'ai mentionné grosso modo parce que après j'ai découvert que c'est juste pour 15 minutes, je peux parler de tout. Donc j'ai essayé de minimiser le maximum pour parler au niveau du secteur privé. Donc ce qu'il a fait l'État, c'est parce que et oui, il y a le secteur privé, il y a des partenariats au niveau de gouvernement privé, au niveau de l'Égypte et aussi au niveau de l'Arabie Saoudite, surtout en Arabie Saoudite. Mais puisque c'est un pays de développement, donc il y a des efforts en secteur privé, mais pour le secteur privé, il y a beaucoup de problèmes au niveau de l'Égypte, c'est spécialement l'Égypte pour parler, donc il y a beaucoup de choses à dire à ce niveau. Les ONG, franchement, j'ai pas trouvé beaucoup de choses à ce niveau. Peut-être que j'ai pas pu trouver parce que moi, je n'ai pas trouvé, mais il existe. Ça n'empêche. Mais pour le secteur privé, oui, j'ai trouvé énormément de choses à dire là-bas. Mais juste pour implémenter tout dans la présentation, c'est difficile. J'ai essayé quand même de donner des chiffres, etc., par rapport à la proportion. Les startups aussi de tech dans la région de l'Afrique du Nord. L'Égypte, ça enregistre un nombre très, très important à son niveau. Aussi pour l'Arabie Saoudite, si on parle des grands projets de smart cities, aussi d'autres projets de l'intelligence artificielle. Mais oui, j'ai lu quelques rapports, beaucoup de choses au niveau du journal, des sites web, des rapports officiels de l'Égypte et aussi de l'Arabie Saoudite. Mais pour faire inclure tout ça dans la présentation, c'est un peu difficile. Et j'espère que j'ai répondu à toute la question parce que je suis dans la rue, j'arrive pas à entendre tout.
Oui, oui, c'est très bien, c'est parfait. Juste, je voulais savoir si vous aviez creusé le niveau d'analyse de la provenance des programmes, voilà.
Oui, j'ai déjà. Dans la présentation même, je peux partager avec vous ça après pour être utile pour les autres personnes qui veulent découvrir ça. Parce que quand même, c'est très intéressant d'avoir les initiatives, les opportunités qui ont été créées au niveau du secteur privé, au niveau du secteur public et aussi pour les programmes à très long terme, au niveau pour l'intelligence artificielle et aussi pour même l'automatisation. C'est pour l'Égypte, c'est très difficile parce que on peut remarquer que oui, il y a ces projets ambitieux, mais ça prendra assez de temps en comparaison parce qu'il y a les problèmes d'abord financiers, parce que l'Égypte, c'est pas comme l'Arabie Saoudite. Il y a moins de fonds, aussi de compétences, etc. Par contre, l'Arabie Saoudite, il peut faire appel à des compétences de l'étranger pour faire venir. Aussi, ça crée d'autres problèmes. Et voilà, donc il y a d'autres choses à découvrir, Inch'Allah. J'espère qu'on aura l'opportunité pour parler plus de ce sujet, soit sous forme de conférence ou de webinaire, ou même de partager avec vous la présentation après.
Merci, Kautar. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous, Myriam.
Okay, thank you. So, further questions, please. We'll still have 5 minutes. We'll still have 5 minutes. J'ai une question. I have a question for Sadedine. Enfin, la question, c'est que est-ce que vous avez déjà des lois sur l'utilisation de l'IA? Par exemple, en matière de justice, jusqu'à quel point le juge peut utiliser ou non l'IA en matière d'enseignement? Est-ce que des lois, il y a des lois spécifiques pour chaque secteur ou bien est-ce que vous avez des lois bien précis, déjà des lois bien précises concernant l'utilisation de l'IA? Ici à Matin, on est en train de travailler vraiment sur le sujet, c'est pourquoi la question.
Exactement. Donc, c'est le cas également au Maroc. Donc, le Maroc participe beaucoup et continuellement aux travaux de l'Organisation internationale du travail. Et je pense au niveau international, c'est un débat aujourd'hui de penser à l'IA. Aujourd'hui, on a vu dans la présentation de Abdelmoumen comment les auditeurs, donc ils utilisent l'intelligence artificielle, donc ils l'utilisent pas d'une manière officielle, mais d'une manière officieuse. Les profs aujourd'hui, les enseignants, l'utilisent d'une manière officieuse également. Les étudiants l'utilisent également. Et donc, tout le monde aujourd'hui l'utilise. Les juges, ils peuvent peut-être les utiliser. Donc, c'est un travail de recherche peut-être qu'il faut faire euh, dans différents métiers, dans différents domaines. Mais au niveau juridiction ou bien au niveau loi, c'est pas encore adapté. Donc, on est toujours, donc il y a un gap, il y a un déphasage compris. Donc, peut-être que les choses avancent avec un rythme un peu très élevé. Et donc, c'est très difficile pour nous de faire par exemple, pour le transport au niveau du Maroc, donc les applications de transport, ils ne sont pas encore autorisées officiellement. Donc, ils sont autorisés officieusement. Par exemple, un jeune qui conduit d'une manière, entre guillemets, informelle et légale, donc il est intercepté par la police, et donc la police, il peut le protéger des chauffeurs de taxi traditionnels. Donc, il peut lui dire non, donc tu peux passer, donc il peut le protéger. Donc, mais d'une manière indirecte, donc on autorise, parce qu'on sait très bien que on a besoin, parce qu'on doit suivre la tendance au niveau international. Par exemple, les touristes qui viennent ici au Maroc, ils utilisent l'application, soit Uber, soit InDrive, ils peuvent l'utiliser. Ils ne savent pas que c'est informel et que c'est illégal. Et parfois, donc, il y a certains incidents où ils sont interceptés par les chauffeurs de taxi. Donc, il y a des conflits, des incidents, alors que le touriste ne comprend pas pourquoi. Et donc, ça arrivé donc plusieurs fois. Il y avait même une personne diplomatique donc, qui est tombée dans cette situation et ça a suscité un débat. Et donc, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, donc, il y a un débat, il y a un progrès au niveau réflexion, mais on n'est pas encore arrivé au niveau de la mise en place réelle de ces lois. Voilà, donc je pense que ça va venir parce qu'on ne peut pas se passer de ça. Et une dernière chose, je travaille avec une association qui fait suivre les mères victimes de violences. Et donc, il y a plusieurs assistants sociaux et sociaux. Et donc, ils font le rapport en audio ou bien ils envoient un email et c'est l'intelligence artificielle qui suit la situation de ces femmes et qui rédige les rapports et qui également suit par numéro seulement de dossier parce qu'il y a une question éthique. Et même la femme, elle peut suivre son dossier, elle peut même demander à l'IA, par exemple, de lui rédiger un petit rapport ou bien de lui parler de la situation, etc. Donc, c'est un peu délicat. Il y a la question éthique qui est également intéressante à ce niveau-là. Il y a également ce qui a été dit par Judith, donc creuser ce problème et ce gap, parce que ceux qui sont précarisés, qui sont exclus avec les IA, ils vont l'être plus. Donc, il faut penser également à tout ça dans les nouvelles lois pour qu'ils soient plus adaptés également à notre culture locale également. Merci.
Thank you.
Je vous en
So
prie.
that's the end of this session. Thank you to all our presenters and participants to our to your rich engagement during this session on AI, automation, and labor transformations. I wish you all an excellent continuation of the conference. Thank you.
May I just say that we have a small change in the schedule. We're going to take the break after the following session. So I would like to be excused for this 10-minute break. We're going to take it later on. Antonio, please.
Thank you very much, Miriam, and thank you to Manu for chairing this session, which was very diverse and stimulating. So, despite this little change, it is my pleasure and an honor for all of us to welcome Sharat Srinivasan, who is a professor at the University of Cambridge, and he will be our next keynote speaker. Sharat is a David and Ellen Potter Professor of International Politics, and he is also a fellow at King's College at the University of Cambridge. We met when we were both in Cambridge because he co-directs the Center of Governance and Human Rights, the CGHR, and because of these, he works specifically on politics in Africa and conflicts and peace building and peacemaking and in a global perspective. And he has been the co-editor of the special issue of the Journal of Eastern African Studies called Publics in Africa in a Digital Age, and also, importantly, the Oxford Handbook of Peaceful Assembly. Among the topics that he studies, there is specifically the situation in the Sudans and in East Africa in particular. But today he will address a topic that is closer to the matter of our concern, which is basically how AI is impacting Eastern Africa. Just before I yield the floor to him, I also want to point out that this keynote speaker, because of the change in our schedule, is going to be slightly shorter. So we're going to be over by 4:30 Cairo time, so 4:30 p.m. Cairo time. So without further ado, I yield the floor to Sharat. So Sharat, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Antonio, for that very kind and generous introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you to you and to Paula and to Miriam for inviting me. And I've had a chance to just dip in a little bit in what has been a busy couple of days, but can see the richness of the sessions and the papers that you've already had. So I just want to also say a big thanks for the adjustments around the schedule that we've allowed for, which I think has made this possible. And I appreciate the flexibility of others in helping with that. I'm going to speak a little bit, a bit less time, just to allow for some time for questions and answers at the end. And as you can tell from the title of my paper, this is a broader keynote. It's not really only or specifically around the particular issues of data work. It's rather trying to bring a broader perspective to the experiences of AI in Eastern Africa. And I'm doing that from the basis of a collection of contributions, including from Adio and Paula and Antonio, to a set of papers on AI in Eastern Africa, coming from diverse disciplinary perspectives, diverse thematic perspectives. And I'm drawing on that, but then also drawing on a couple of other provocations, which I found helpful to think about AI in Eastern Africa in a kind of critical and provocative perspective. So I want to start with this idea of the thingness of AI. And I'm drawing here on a commentary by Lucy Suchman in Big Data and Society in 2023, a commentary entitled The Uncontroversial Thingness of AI. And in that, Sukhman asks, how is it that AI has come to be figured uncontroversially as a thing, however many controversies it may engender? So AI itself is not questioned, but all the things that AI is doing and all the manifestations of AI and the contentions around it underneath is what is controversial. And she thinks that what that does is it stabilizes AI as a figure, and that enables further investments in associated techniques and technologies. So AI's status as controversial, underneath this thing of AI, works to actually reiterate both its ontological status and its agency. And so Sukhman's implores us to think about this and says, look, it follows that interventions into the field of AI controversies that actually fail to trouble and destabilize the figure of AI risk contributing to its uncontroversial reproduction. So we have to be careful that our battles with AI and what it's doing and what it does doesn't inadvertently reify AI as an uncontroversial thing. And she just says that this is not to deny all of the real things going on, the proliferating data and compute-intensive techniques that travel under the sign of AI, but rather to just think about a keener focus on the locations, the politics, the material semiotic specificity and effects, including how this enacts a kind of singular object of AI. So all of that's a bit abstract, but I think what it does is it makes the case for beginning with a provocation like this, to try to understand and challenge the uncontroversial thingness of AI from a place in the world such as Eastern Africa. And I think the striking paradox here is that AI is both radically underdetermined and also relentlessly overdetermined. It's underdetermined in the sense that its actual forms, functions, and futures remain profoundly unsettled. These are empirically in the making. But it's overdetermined in the sense that dominant imaginaries, corporate policy, security, and scientific are stabilizing around AI with breathtaking speed and in effect totalizing what that future is allowed to be. So this keynote really is arguing that Eastern Africa is one valuably generative place in the world from which to trouble AI's thingness. Not because the region is in any sense marginal, but rather because the region is constitutive of the histories of extraction and coercion within which AI arises, the global politics that deploy it, the languages through which it's contested, the labor that toils to build it, and the imaginations through which alternative futures are continuously assembled. So across Nairobi, Addis Ababa, Mogadishu, Bulawayo, Antananarivo, we encounter manifestations of AI that refuse the singularity implied in the AI revolution. And instead, we see disjunctures made visible in sharper relief. The proximity of the utopian promise to dystopian extraction. The simultaneity of high-tech spectacle and mundane labor, the collision of hegemonic narratives with grounded, generative, situated practices. These are not peripheral distortions, they are actually central insights into how we challenge what AI is. So I want to draw on several empirical studies from this collection of articles I'm co-editing with George Karakwe-Vanane from Edinburgh and Stephanie Deeperveen from KCL in London, that are looking at a range of things like smart cities in Kenya, to Somali language translation politics, to synthetic newsroom media in Zimbabwe, extractive labor in different countries in the region, and Ethiopian socio-technical imaginaries. And all of this to propose a simple claim that from Eastern Africa, AI appears not as a thing, but as an encounter, a set of relations shaped by extraction, translation, political imagination, human labor, and unfinished histories of colonial and capitalist power. And crucially, it's in these relations, not in the technological artifacts, that new possibilities of critique, refusal, and reimagination emerge. So first, let me turn to colonial presence, why Eastern Africa helps us rethink AI. AI is often described as neither artificial nor intelligent. Indeed, there is nothing artificial about the data centers extracting scarce power from regional grids, nothing artificial about the mineral supply chains passing through conflict-affected regions, nothing intelligent about statistical optimization trained on corpora embedded with historical violence. And for African contexts especially, none of this is new. The colonial project, too, was animated by emancipatory and modernizing discourses that concealed racial hierarchy, extraction, and surveillance behind universalist claims of progress. What we see in Eastern Africa today is not a return of the past, but rather a colonial present, a system in which labor, land, data, knowledge continue to be unequally valued, and in which the technological infrastructures slot into older geopolitical and economic currents. But unlike earlier moments, today's power is less visible, it's more dispersed, it's more algorithmic. Identifying its contours requires a situated and grounded inquiry, the kind that I think the region's scholarship from diverse disciplines is now producing. So then, to argue against the thingness of AI, let me move to this problem of thingification. AI is increasingly treated as a unified entity with agency. AI will transform healthcare or threatens democracy, or AI must be governed. But from an Eastern African vantage point, this abstraction simply disintegrates. What we instead see are infrastructures, supply chains, discourses, and labors, all unevenly distributed and often incoherent. We see AI in the flux of many material situated becomings. The region exposes the deep messiness and contingency of what AI is becoming. And this matters because hegemonic discourses thrive on abstraction. They turn AI into a totalizing horizon, a future everyone must align with, prepare for, adapt to. Yet if we hold on to AI's underdeterminedness, its not yetness, we open analytical space to imagine it otherwise, and thus also critical and radical opportunity. So let me explore some of the cases that come up in our collection so far. Let's begin first in Nairobi and Mombasa with so-called smart city or safe city deployments, Huawei's integrated surveillance systems that combine CCTV, facial recognition, and policing analytics. These systems are often exported as turnkey AI solutions, supposedly designed to reduce crime and improve public safety. But research from Kenya shows something much more complex. Rather than functioning as rational, totalizing systems of algorithmic control, these infrastructures are woven in messy, imperfect, quotidian ways into pre-existing political practices, localized forms of authority, and historically sedimented policing cultures. They privilege certain geographies, bypass others, and enact selective visibility that maps onto class and neighborhood boundaries. And they just become part of the choreography of urban power, which has a long history, including as a colonial project of the city as a technology of power. Not a stable AI system, but an incomplete assemblage of devices, operators, bureaucrats, vendors, and political priorities. In other words, AI here is not a thing. This sort of smart city is a bit of a chimera. It's rather a techno-political relation, a complex and underdetermined one that's shaped by actors who operate with a sort of contingency and improvisation, a bit of intentionality here, but also chaotic kind of failings and incompleteness there. From Kenya, we might then move to Ethiopia and the sort of spectacle of AI imaginary in the Ethiopian state. It offers Ethiopia one of the clearest examples in the region of AI as a political imaginary. And here AI becomes a symbol of national destiny, a promise of prosperity, modernity, and continental leadership by 2050. In this, it builds on our high modernist statist visions that nourish a state's regime and its right to rule. And then we can understand the logic of these kinds of visions, these sort of techno-optimistic visions. And yet the context is one of political fragility, conflict, and crisis. So within this disjuncture, AI functions as performative governance, a spectacle that both distracts from and legitimates state authority. The now infamous deepfake of Emperor Haile Selassie, generated by the Ethiopian Artificial Intelligence Institute and broadcast on state media, makes this literal. A deepfake emperor returns from the dead to bless the government's modernizing agenda and the state's technological future. But what is striking is the tension within Ethiopia's own political imaginary between Pan-African leadership and narrow nationalism, between digital sovereignty and dependence on foreign funders, between promises of security and practices of surveillance, between dreams of leapfrogging and the realities of limited infrastructures. And these contradictions reveal AI not as an inevitable or autonomous transformation, but as a discursive project under construction, shaped by political ambition, institutional anxiety, and geopolitical alignments. A different kind of visibility emerges in Somali language generative AI. Here, the politics of translation becomes a site through which AI's figure of universality unravels. So just one example from one of the papers, when Google's Gemini was asked, "Where are you?" in Somali, it replied in Somali, translated as, "I am a type of artificial intelligence." But the word for intelligence, surdun, in Somali carries connotations of espionage and state intelligence. So in a security-saturated context, this translation is not neutral. In fact, it's dangerous. It reveals how training corpora, conflict discourse, and linguistic hierarchies shape what AI becomes in a kind of complex, interrelated way. So in Somalia, generative AI becomes entangled in long histories of linguistic hierarchy, dialect politics, the sort of minority dialects like Afmai being out of the picture, less visible, colonial legacies of script standardization, and contemporary conflicts structured through information operations. Here, then, translation work, whether through digital rights, lexicons, or new Somali AI glossaries, become an act of political labor, raising questions about who gets to name AI and whose epistemic frames are privileged. So through this lens, AI does not merely process language, it participates in the reproduction of linguistic inequalities and power games, while also offering new sites of resistance and imagination. A related set of tensions appears in Zimbabwe, where digital newsrooms are experimenting with AI-generated presenters like Alice. At the Center for Innovation and Technology site, Alice anchors news programs in English and Chikalanga, offering speed and efficiency in a resource-constrained environment, but also as a means to hold state power to account ostensibly without exposing humans to coercive enforcement. So it's kind of an interesting opportunity that Alice presents. But Alice also reveals questions of dependency on Western donor-funded tools, on editorial vulnerability to the platform logics and the embedded politics within these sorts of platform logics, linguistic mismatch and pronunciation difficulty, a kind of cultural flattening, and also, interestingly, user anxiety about the effect of this on the media newsroom and the displacement of jobs. So here AI is a kind of contingent technology that's doing things in the world, but shaped by unreliable funding streams, infrastructure scarcity, language politics, and the improvisation strategies of journalists navigating political and economic precarity. And again, we see AI as not a stable system, but rather as a negotiation, a site of contestation in which actors tactically appropriate, adapt, or resist technological forms. So, of course, if these cases destabilize AI's political autonomy, perhaps nothing dissolves its epistemic autonomy more forcefully than the labor and work that actually builds AI. And this is, of course, very familiar to all of you. So I won't go over this too much, but I would just note that in some of the studies in this contribution, one of the elements that comes through strongly is the cognitive and emotional labor required to train large AI language models and platform moderation pipelines. So the thousands of data annotators, as you know, who are involved in this, and the kind of work that's involved, that often involves labeling speech, classifying violence, and absorbing trauma at scale. And many are doing this inside windowless rooms under algorithmic productivity regimes and exposed to violent and sexualized content for hours each day, all of which you know only too well. The result is not only burnout and PTSD, but, and I think this comes through the papers in this collection, a deeper moral injury, a reshaping of the self. And yet this labor often gets framed as kind of AI for development, as sort of a pathway to prosperity. Yet its structure mirrors the classic logics of global value chains, outsourcing, labor arbitrage, precarious contracts, and uneven distributions of harm. So quite clearly from here, we see that AI is never an autonomous machine. It is dependent on the bodies and minds of young workers in Nairobi and Antananarivo, dependent on the effective labor of people who are instructed to treat it like data, while knowing viscerally that sometimes what they're processing is human suffering. And these dependencies are configured in hierarchies of power. AI's intelligence is not simply machine intelligence, it is human labor, obscured, racialized, and geographically displaced. And the region makes this visible. If the previous examples foreground structural power, this last example around Afrofuturist agency centers agency. And this is a study in this collection that's about the work of Kwala, a Kenyan organization that's navigating AI research and policy with civic technology. And it exemplifies a kind of generative agency. Not resistance alone, not application alone, but a strategic relational practice of world building within the constraints that AI and sort of political economy realities necessitate. So in this study, Carla's engagements with ministers, policymakers, and communities show that AI imaginaries are not only important, they're also locally shaped. That African policy actors are not passive, that they can negotiate, translate, and recraft agendas, and thus also should be capable of being influenced towards better agendas. That participatory civic tech design that's grounded in actual context and shaped by human socio-political actors might yet expand democratic agency, that possibility remains real within this underdeterminedness of what AI can be. And finally, that imagination's speculative, cultural, grounded imagination is itself a political resource in this time of shaping what AI is becoming. So Afrofuturism in this context is not just aesthetic, it's a method, a way of inhabiting the underdetermined space of AI to articulate alternative trajectories. Futures not limited by the extractive logics of platform capitalism, nor by the technocratic narratives of catching up, but from emerging local epistemologies, cultural frameworks, and communal values. And this is perhaps what it looks like to refuse AI's totalizing horizon, to insist on the plurality of possible futures with technology. So what does Eastern Africa teach us about AI as a global formation? I think across these cases, certain themes crystallize. One is the ambivalence as an analytical resource. Eastern Africa reveals AI's profound ambivalences between hype and harm, innovation and extraction, promise and dispossession. And ambivalence is not a weakness, it's a methodological strength. It allows us to resist premature closure and hold open AI's underdeterminedness. The second is disjuncture as diagnostic. Where the contradictions of modernity run deepest, AI's disjunctures between ambition and capacity, between rhetoric and infrastructure, become visible in sharper, sometimes absurd extremes. And I think places in the world like Eastern Africa reveal these disjunctures more sharply and thus provide more diagnostic insight. The third is materiality over abstraction. Whether through data work, translation, or smart city infrastructure, Eastern Africa insists that AI is material as well, fundamentally. It consumes bodies, land, energy, minerals, and labor. And this counters to the tendency to anthropomorphize AI as agentic or autonomous. A fourth theme is connections and circulations. The region sits within transnational circuits of data, policy, investment, talent, and imaginaries. And in that sense, the kind of place in the world that is Eastern Africa is a related place, and it speaks back to and listens to other encounters. And Eastern Africa thus is sort of fully inside this world, not in its margins either. A fifth theme is around personhood and datafication, that across the region, people are grappling with how AI reconfigures the human subject, whether that's the experience of data workers or in the kind of ways in which language politics plays out. Who counts, who is seen, how datafied selves are produced, and how AI personas shape public life are all really up for grabs. And the last theme, I guess, from this is sort of generative possibilities, that amid all these tensions, Eastern Africa surfaces not only critique, but also possibility of creative appropriation, speculative imagination, civic kinds of innovation, and situated world building. So to conclude around how we trouble AI and its thingness, I want to return to Schuchman's injunction to trouble the figure of AI. I think what Eastern Africa shows us insistently and vividly is that AI is not a thing. It is an empty signifier filled and refilled with competing meanings. It is underdetermined, still in the making. It is overdetermined, captured by hegemonic narratives of inevitability and progress. It is material and dependent on human bodies, minds, and territorial ecologies. It is discursive, produced through policy, hype, and political desire. And it's also situated, always embedded within specific histories and social worlds. Finally, it's contested, negotiated by actors at all scales whose agency exceeds the narrow frame of technological determinism. So Eastern Africa does not simply illustrate global AI trends. I think it exposes them, it complicates them, and it destabilizes them. And in doing so, it expands the conceptual space in which AI can be understood, not as a monolithic revolution, not as a singular future, but as a relational, contingent, and contested terrain. And it is in this in-between space, between extraction and imagination, between colonial present and liberatory possibility, that new social knowledge of AI is being produced, including, I think, from the likes of many of you. And it is precisely this kind of grounded, empirical, critical, and generative scholarship that will allow us to rethink what AI is, what it is becoming, and what futures remain possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharat. That was very, very, very good and extremely clear in your pointing out that the ambivalence is not a weakness, but it can be actually a methodology that we can leverage to understand, to have a better understanding of AI. And talking about the better understanding of AI, before we let you go, and thanking you again for your availability and flexibility today in terms of Howard. We do have 2 questions, actually 1 question and a half in the Q&A part. They both come from Søren Sørensen, and they read as such. Considering that reification is central to capitalism itself, and that technologies and social relations of domination have been attempted, reified throughout the history of capitalism, should we perhaps also challenge the newness of or novelty of machine learning systems as something disruptive and unprecedented? And as an appendix to the previous one, also, if you want to challenge the thingness, novelty, and anthropomorphization of AI, should we change our own vocabulary, e.g., by avoiding using the term AI at all?
Yeah, these are great questions, very resonant. I'm just nodding a lot. So Søren, thank you for those questions. I think your first point is absolutely right. I mean, I think that there's another way of thinking about this is also sort of presentism, in which the thing is sort of a shock and it's unprecedented, and it sort of it displaces the past as not relevant to this thing that has happened, and I think it paralyzes the present in the face of the future. And I think that is a rhetorical move, and I think reification is part of that. It's central, as you said, to capitalist logics as well. And I think we should definitely challenge, as a result, the newness or novelty and historicization, and thinking in sort of in a longer set of ways around encounters and patterns with technologies of different kinds, including pre-digital ones. I think puts into place some of what is going on, and stops the. It's not that the real material effects of these technologies today are not real. They are real, and they need to be handled carefully. But seeing them as unprecedented or disruptive without understanding their historical sort of situatedness is really problematic, I think. And again, Eastern Africa is another region from which to to sort of say, oh gosh, a rhetoric or discourse of progress that meanwhile is, allowing for deeply extractive and predatory practices is we've seen this movie before, right? Sort of thing. So I think that's a really good point. And yeah, I would I think what you say about not using the term AI is I guess the middle space is pretty inverted commas. It's probably not good enough. And one of the things we have to do is, you know, this is a category that has a name that also has force and power. So on the one hand, it can't be engaged with in a way that reproduces it, but on the other hand, to disengage from it is to sometimes leave the discursive space where it can be challenged. And I think that's a dilemma for any kind of critical scholarship: is can you engage with the critique and the project of critique and action against a dominant vocabulary by not referring to it? Can you enter into and shape and change the public space discourse if you haven't engaged with it? I think that's a question I leave it open, but I think many strategies are probably required, not just one, and sometimes with different audiences as well. But that's a really good point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that we just hit the 4:30 p.m. mark. So we are perfectly on time. And I want to again thank you, Sharat Srinivasan, for his keynote. And now we will allow ourselves a little break of 10 minutes, and then we will have the keynote. Was initially scheduled for 4 p.m. So it will be Nagla Rizli about women, AI, and work in Middle East and Africa. Thank you again, and see you in 10 minutes. Bye-bye.
Bye.
screen.
Okay,
So
while
just
you do that, I'll just briefly introduce you.
yes, just give me yes.
Yes.
Just I'm double checking because I had a problem with my network a while ago.
Okay.
Just a second. Let's just test I want to see if the share screen works. I'll have my title.
Sure.
If you bear with me.
Sure.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worry.
Okay, let me just see the Zoom share screen. What's going on here? Okay. Okay, let me just close this. Can you see my screen?
I still see the general slide. Now I think I do. No.
No.
No, I don't.
Okay, wait.
Oh, yes.
That is like this?
Yes, so it's not full screen. I mean, I see your slides. Yes, now I do. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So we can go ahead without further ado. I'm very pleased to introduce our last keynote for this online conference. And I'm very glad to, in particular, introduce the work of Professor Nagla Rizk. She's a professor of economics and she's the founding director of the Access to Knowledge for Development Center at the American University of Cairo School of Business. And within that, the Middle East and North Africa Observatory on Responsible Artificial Intelligence, which I think will provide material for the presentation of today. Nagla's area of research is the economics of knowledge, technology, and development, particular focus on artificial intelligence. And she has very important roles, in particular in terms of policy, like developing the Egypt's strategy for development for AI in particular. And Nagla was also the host of our first INDL-MEA Conference last year and is a co-organizer of the one that we are having now. So I'll thank her very much, not only for her scientific contribution, but also for her organizational support. Nagla, the floor is yours. So you have about 30 minutes and then we'll take 10 minutes for questions, more or less.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the opportunity and thank you for the kind words. It's a pleasure to be collaborating on organizing the INDL-MEA 2. And without further ado, I'm going to delve into my presentation. I have a lot, but I'm conscious of time. So allow me to start right away. My talk, as you kindly mentioned, is Women and Digital Work in the Middle East and Africa, Feminist Perspectives from the MENA Observatory on Responsible AI. Oops, sorry, I'm just... Yes, my talk, this is the outline of my talk. I'll try to be very efficient. I will start by some examples from our daily practices. I'll give you bits and pieces of things around us. I will talk a little bit about AI, take a look at the context of what we see around us in MEA, leading to a conclusion of why we need a feminist lens when we think of artificial intelligence, why feminist AI is important, and sharing with you information about our work at the observatory. So I'm starting by the examples from everyday life. Now, when you do a Google search for the word doctor, what you get is these pictures and image search, and you get 36 out of the 100, and I counted them, are women. If you search for the word, if you search for the word nurse, you find 83 women out of 100. Now, if you search domestic helper, you find 96 out of 100 women. If you search for software development, women are 29 images out of 100. If you search for Google Translate for the word professor, in Arabic it becomes ustadh, which is a male professor. If you search for the word doctor, in Arabic it will be tabib, male doctor. If you search for nurse, it will be mumarrida, female.
nurse. So these are things around us. If you, the virtual assistants, they're always women in demure sounds. I am your helper, I'm your assistant. This, when there was an incident of Siri being given a sexist remark and she responds in, a demure sound, I'd blush if I could. What we have is a gendered AI. Artificial intelligence is gendered, and women and other groups, but most prominently women, are not very fortunate on that front. So if we very briefly unpack AI, and I'm talking to experts, so I'm just going very briefly, we're looking at data, algorithm, and people. And if we look at the data, I've spoken about this before. This is a slide that I like very much. There is women are invisible. There is a chapter that I teach in my course in this book. It's called One Size Fits Men. And when you look at your data, quite often, if data is not disaggregated by gender, by class, by age, by geographical area, by my geographical group, and not mean by class, I mean by income group, by geographical, then if data is blurred, then the conclusions will be blurred. And if, as I say, invisible in data, invisible in conclusions, and invisible in policy. With algorithms, well, quite often what you find is, there is a notorious cases of hiring and promotion problems, algorithms, and I know there was talk about that during the conference. There is the famous incident of Amazon, where scoring applications from 1 to 5 stars, where male candidates were preferred from within the system, and clearly there was a problem with the training data. Incidentally, I was teaching earlier, and one of my students had a presentation about AI hiring and female, discrimination against females hiring using AI. There are also other examples. The Facebook ads delivery algorithm disproportionately showed delivery, driver, mechanic, and STEM jobs ads to men. Algorithms can be notorious on that front. There's always another incident. A Carnegie Mellon study showed that Google's ad system showed ads for high-paying executive coaching to men far more often than women. And of course, when it comes to credit, there is also a famous incident with the Apple Card scandal, with the Apple Card's algorithm granting men 10 to 20 times higher credit limits than their wives, shared assets, despite the shared assets, and this came from systemic biases in credit scoring models and structural flaws in how financial data is weighted. And this is important because work also includes entrepreneurship, and this can work against women's entrepreneurship. So in the end, we're looking at data, algorithms, and people, who designs, who owns, who benefits, are big questions that face us. So from our everyday life to unpacking AI, let's just take a moment to look at our own context in the Middle East and Africa. Opportunities, challenges, what do we have when it comes to women and work? Female work in MEA, just to look at that picture, female unemployment rate 2024. The picture is self-explanatory. I mean, look at MEA, the Middle East, and parts of sub-Saharan Africa, the highest, Middle East for sure, Middle East and North Africa, the highest global rate of female unemployment globally. The picture speaks for itself. If we look at, again, this graph shows you female unemployment in MEA, the highest in the world, then Latin American and the Caribbean, then sub-Saharan Africa. Female labor participation, again, the picture speaks 1,000 words. You just take a look. This in Middle East and North Africa, self-explanatory. Female labor force participation. Africa is a little bit better, but still, a lot to be desired. This is a graph that shows, again, I was trying to look at youth as well, because female youth also, things can get pretty problematic. This one is for MENA. When you look at the youth unemployment, is 24.4%. Almost double the global average. Youth also employment to population ratio is the lowest among the world's regions. That's as far as youth unemployment is concerned. Africa is a little bit better, but nearly 3 in 4 young adult workers were in a form of work that was deemed insecure. So the employment situation in our parts of the world is not really wonderful. That's another set of data that I was able to find. And when you looks at youth unemployment rate disaggregated by gender in the MENA region and sub-region, when you find, this is the word youth unemployment rate, look at the total for MENA is twice the world rate, and when we look at women, it's really a notorious figure. You have the world is 12.8 for women is 3 times as much in the Arab states and Middle East and North Africa, which can include non-Arab states in the statistic. So and then men is also the situation is bad, but it's a lot worse for women. Now, when we look at why is this important? Because when you look at demographics of the region, we know that we live in young regions where the majority of our population are young. So any talk of the future of work is talking about the future of our people and what they stand to face. And I'm not going to cover, jobs lost and jobs gained. I spoke about this in my last INDL last year in my presentation. I want to focus a little bit more about women and the challenges that they face. So if we look again, when you look at again showing how the age by region, Africa is the most youthful continent globally, where the median age is 19.3. So also more statistics in sub-Saharan Africa, the youth not in employment, education or training rate 21.9%. In MENA, 44.2 of young women were in need status. These figures to me are scary, and like more double that of young men. In again, back to sub-Saharan Africa, 3 out of 5 young needs, not in education, employment or training, were women. These are problematic figures. And the end of the day, the context tells us that we have a situation where we would like to have more female employment and more participation in the labor force. And I'm not even mentioning, the informal sector. We'll get to that in a second. Again, I was, researching the female entrepreneurship index, and again, I find that our regions fall short of performing as well as the rest of the world. So let's look at what opportunities are there. Yes, the situation is hard, and given that, of course, women resort to gig work. They resort to, this is a picture from a project that we have on informal digital entrepreneurship for women. And they resort to informal work, informal entrepreneurship, gig work, and the likes. Now, the second best is not to have a job. And then the argument is always that this offers flexible work. And I'll get to that in a second. So the reality is the gig work does offer an opportunity. That's the sad part. And not just in Egypt. We've seen research elsewhere in South Africa and other parts of the global south, that the alternative is to have informal work. So these are quotes from actual research that we have done. So they tell you that digital platforms, they broke down the physical barriers. They just, got us, this is a research on domestic platform workers in MENA that we did, gig workers in MENA countries, and they managed to give women the courage to go and work rather than do it on a personal basis. In other studies, this is women in other parts of the region. We have researched Egypt, Jordan, Tunisia, and Lebanon. Nearly all workers interviewed indicated depending on platform work as the primary source of income. They are not bound by working hours, and hence flexibility comes at the core of the business model. So there are opportunities. Of course, again, earlier studies showed that I did a study several years back on male Uber drivers. 90% of the interviewees, they joined as a way to earn more income. 96% of the drivers had a high school diploma or above, and more than 50% had a university degree. Unemployment of the educated, I did not include a statistic here, but the rates are high, I know for sure, in the Middle East and North Africa. And again, people, go to it as a way of an alternative to informal employment. That's the reality. And it's a sad reality because this work comes with challenges, right? Overall, the work environment for women and men, but more for women, but there's the work, informal work opportunities. Women in the formal sector, they need to take maternity leave, and that works against them. And algorithms, when they come to promotion or in hiring, that shows that they have had less years of experience. So that severely works against them. And of course, we know about unpaid care work by women and the precarity of gig work, of course. So the sad reality is that it offers an alternative, but then it is also a very challenging alternative because there's no, of course, health insurance, there's no safety on the job, and so on and so forth. These are quotes, of course, I will not read them, but this is from work that we have done at the center, at the observatory, on the ground in MENA countries, and also quoting research by partners in South Africa. So harassment and safety in general is, of course, a major risk to women, especially when they also get to work in homes in the domestic work sector. We have quotes from women that really tell stories that tend to be really painful. You know, they work in surge hours, for example, to make up for the low hours that they drive on the ride sharing. So they end up in areas where that are unsafe, and then that connectivity is weak. So compounded challenges, you know, and so it's a challenge to their safety. Already a woman on a motorbike in the MENA region, at least, is an unusual sight. So they get subjected to harassment. In Jordan, they have been harassed, previously harassed. And as a woman, one woman remarked that she is afraid to receive requests from a man or a group of single men. And one female rider in Egypt told of having been followed by a car when delivering an order, being raced and intimidated by microbuses. South Africa, when all drivers face threats such as hijackings, assaults, and extortion, often linked to tensions with minibus industry, female drivers experience heightened vulnerabilities due to gender perceptions of weakness and societal norms around women's safety. Gig work studies in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, by quoted that we researched, but firsthand from our partners' research in Lebanon, Jordan, Tunisia, that women are algorithmically penalized because of the decline in their late night or high crime area jobs for safety reasons. They don't want to work in unsafe areas, and when they take risks, they are subjected to challenges. They can turn down work for childcare or safety reasons. They're less likely to be hired as ride-hailing drivers, earn significantly less. They have to juggle household responsibilities. So there are constant, I think that the message is there. Even though in a study by IFC in Egypt, even though women drivers were better educated than men with university degrees, they still drove fewer hours and more selectively, and so in the end they really end up making less money. Then they can be turned down because they're a woman. And then again, this is a passenger cancellation bias. If it's cancelled, then it turns against them. And this, evidence of that. So what I've argued for is that women are really caught between a rock and a hard place because, the alternative, they face the same challenges that men face in gig workers, but then also heightened challenges over and above, while they go under the myth of flexibility, because flexibility, if they continue to work because these are flexible opportunities, but it actually ends up cornering them in the endless, thankless, if you will, position of being caretakers for the family and doomed to be always looking for precarious work. Very quickly, I'm sorry about the wordy slides. I was just putting evidence, but I just, credit injustice. Again, women get discriminated against for credit, and I highlight it's not just the algorithmic injustice, but also the analog in reality. I mean, at the end, there are examples from Nigeria where a woman, the algorithm misinterpreted her frequent mobile transactions as cash flow instability. But in other parts of the world, women at the end there is a gender gap in their credit, in what takes place. There's a credit gap, if you will, for women. Part of the reason is that no matter how neutral the algorithm is, the reality is women will end up owning less assets. In some parts of the conventional parts, they don't even inherit, so their ownership of assets is less, and this can be translated and magnified in algorithms and affects their entrepreneurship potential. Data invisibilities. Women, I mentioned this before, so there is an example from Egypt during COVID. I can explain during the Q&A, but the point being that by the time a woman who is working in a domestic informal sector, living in an informal housing, actually got to receive the promised cash payment of £500, the chances were almost close to nil because of her invisibility in the data and in the system. So the analog realities, I wanted to put these statistics because yes, we looked at the Google image search, but really the reality is, discriminatory. The reality, the analog reality is not very good. So what you see on what happens with the algorithms and with the digital technology is that not only it reflects reality, but magnifies it. So very quickly, in Africa, 28% of physicians are women, 76% of nurses are female. Okay, in Africa. In MENA, women, 42% of doctors, but 56 to 96% of nurses. In Saudi Arabia, women constitute 1/3 of all Saudi doctors and 80% of working nurses in Saudi Arabia. In Africa, 18.5% of full professors in South Africa and around almost 30% of associate professors are women, the rest are men. In Ghana, 8% of professors are women. Broader Africa-wide data set notes, male academic staff dominate, especially at higher ranks. So the algorithms are guilty, but not all that guilty. I mean, we are guilty, humans are guilty of that as well. Survey of Arab higher education institutes, women lead fewer than 7% of universities. In Africa, again, 96 million domestic workers, but the majority, that's the point, comprising the majority of domestic workers group. And in MENA, domestic work is a very significant sector for female employment. So, I've looked at examples from the daily practices, unpacking AI, look at our context. Let's talk about intersectionality and the need. Why do we need a feminist lens? Intersectionality, I called one, oppression is linked, layers, multi-layers of discrimination and inequality and challenges. It's defined as the interconnected nature of social categorizations such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. So you just have a compounded layer of discrimination, multidimensional inequalities, gender, age, education, income group, geographical location, nationality, just compounded and magnified by AI. So that's why we need feminist AI. Why do we need we need a feminist lens to look at this? So what is feminist AI? It is defined as the act of deconstructing oppressive systems, dismantling historic biases and ingrained inequalities, then building inclusive AI structures that are based on principles of justice, transparency, agency, pluralism, and more. So these are different. I will not read them word for word, but these are more explanations. But the key words are transformational, proactive, dismantling patriarchal structures, oppressive systems, and historical inequalities, constructing new inclusive systems, a holistic approach, ensuring diversity in representation and justice. So it is really striking inequality at the core. So we are at the center, the Access to Knowledge for Development Center and our MENA Observatory on Responsible AI. We are the MENA hub for feminist AI. We've worked on research for the past years, and we're starting a new phase of research within the Feminist AI Research Network, the FAIR network. And I'm just going to pass, these are just, more definitions, principles of more definition. Now, principles of feminist AI, we zoom out to what responsible AI is, and we argue that feminist AI, by definition, is responsible. So let's just look at the broader definition of what responsible AI is. The ethical development and deployment of AI systems that uphold human rights, dignity, and fundamental freedoms while minimizing harm and ensuring fairness, transparency, and accountability. We have compiled, these are the sources of principles of responsible AI, ethical AI, etc. And we have at the center, we have compiled the different principles. I will not read them all, but the screen just speaks for itself. These are the different principles that make the definition of responsible AI. And I argue that if we, zoom in for feminist AI principles, we need to look at, we do look at fairness, mitigating bias, transparency, explainability, accountability, responsibility. I add pluralism, inclusivity, agency, and intersectionality. So global examples of feminist AI solutions. I was made aware that there is the gender-neutral voice assistant, collaboration between Copenhagen Pride, Virtue, Equal AI, an initiative to create a non-binary voice assistant to counter Siri, Alexa. In the world of hiring, we just compiled information on this. I have not tested them myself, but the IBM AI Fairness, detect, understand, and mitigate gender bias, and just details, there's the Unilever's Pymetrics, uses neuroscience-based games to assess candidates, aiming to reduce gendered and racial bias in hiring. There is the, sorry, my screen is, I need to move that. Other approaches, the gender-neutral tools to assess candidates, auditing for gender fairness, anonymized resumes to prevent bias, tools designed to detect, understand, and de-bias solutions, run independent bias audits, and I would add just human oversight and actually explainability of algorithms. We were just discussing this in my class a while ago. So in the world of credit, there are initiatives. Our friends at Synapse Analytics have developed a platform, Conan, a credit decision-making platform that we are told has fully explainable decisions and alerts for bias and data drift. And also, we're told of another platform that audits financial algorithms for bias. So from our daily practices to unpacking AI, to our context, intersectionality, what is feminist AI? In the few minutes that I have, allow me to share with you what the work that we do at the MENA Observatory on responsible AI and the MENA Feminist Hub at the center. Basically, we have created a platform we launched in February 2024, and I invite you to please check it out. The website is being revamped as we speak, so we are updating our content, but it does have some of our work. It's intended to inform, shape, and monitor policy making and practice related to responsible use of AI for development and inclusion in the region. Catalyst for change, dynamic, inclusive, locally driven platform, effective tool for policy making, knowledge source on responsible AI, and vibrant hub for responsible AI. And really our three target goals is to impact policy, practice, and people. This is taken from the observatory. We do have a row for gender and AI and a permanent page for feminist AI, permanent entry for feminist AI, because there's a difference, and I'm happy to explain the difference in the Q&A. And then we also have a permanent window for our research on new forms of work in the MENA region, which I would talk about, would mention, it comes in here, which is about fairer gig and cloud work in the MENA region. So we have partners who are doing work on gig workers in Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon. We already did the first two studies on fair work in Egypt, looking at with Oxford Internet Institute, with the Fair Work Network, 2021 and 2022 and 3. This is the regional study on domestic workers, and these are two pieces of research where we take to policy on the informal digital entrepreneurs, their needs, and we work with them, what their needs are, what the challenges are with policymakers and the civil society, and I'll mention that maybe in my conclusion. So this is a study that we did on women in ride sharing a while ago, and it was extremely informative. This is our work within the Feminist AI Network. This is a study that's done by our partner, Dr. Marwa Saoudi, using, this is an example for Feminist AI, using AI tools to train teachers for girls in Said. Said is an underprivileged geographical area of Egypt where culturally girls are not always put at the forefront, to say it mildly. So they may go to school at different ages in one class, and teachers teach them. This was a personalized, tailored teaching modules for teaching them math in Arabic, using AI to train the teachers. It was done for inclusion of these girls, and it was supported by our Feminist AI Network through our hub. Very quickly, at our partners at the Asia Hub, they supported. One of the examples was a Safe Her. Safe Her was a solution prototype for women's safety in the public transport systems to support women's safety. Also in Latin America, they've also created a solution, an app that connects ride sharers to make sure that they are in touch and safe and sound during their work. Again, based on this, I was very fortunate to have my request accepted here at AUC to teach a course titled Feminist AI, Technology, Gender and Development. And I have students doing amazing pieces of research and learning a lot about these tools and, females and male students. And we have these excellent conversations, and I'm very proud of their research. So now I have a couple of minutes to share with you my conclusions. At the end of the day, from our work in this area, there is a need for a feminist agenda that's cognizant of the complexity of intersectionality for women in our region. Sorry, there's a typo here. Work on fostering a feminist AI, digital and analog solutions. Sorry, I was writing my conclusion in the end. Digital and analog solutions, advancing inclusion on both digital and analog fronts, adopting a multi-stakeholder approach, and that's super important. This is how we impact policy. We do our research, bring everyone around the table, businesses. We worked with businesses for the gig, and they did change their policies for the gig platforms. Civil society, regulators, everyone around the table, parliamentarians, government, small business, big tech, everyone around the table, and push to change policy. And we do have success in that. The labor law in Egypt, the amendments have actually included for the first time mention of gig workers based on our work, our policy brief. Actually, inclusion of gig workers in the data landscape was the questions we convinced the people in charge that we put questions about gig work where people were asked about that so that it's visible in the national data landscape. That's an example of the work that we do. As Paula Kandi mentioned, I was part of the contributors to the first Egypt's AI strategy, and I really worked hard on getting the thinking of inclusion of marginalized groups. All of this is done through our work compiling and utilizing grounds-up research evidence, raising awareness, and bringing everyone around the table, including, by the way, the workers themselves, including the ride-hailing drivers, men and women, including the informal digital entrepreneurs, everyone around the same table with policymakers and with civil society and other partners. And last but not least, engaging in global dialogues like this one, where we share experiences, learn from each other, and push for an agenda for a fairer work environment for women and others in the Middle East and Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Nagla. This was really inspiring and interesting. So are there any questions already? So I see something in the questions and answers. So it's Cosimo who asks, can you please tell us more how you worked with the policymakers and how your work impacted gig workers and AI in Egypt? What are the specific characteristics of working with policymakers in Egypt?
Thank you very much for the question. That's a great question. I think we need to be strategic. So we are positioned at the university, which is great because we are at an equal distance from everyone. So what we do, we start by laying out our research plan and doing research on the ground. And then we have evidence. This is the first step. We really have evidence from on the ground. We have something to work with. We listen to the people. We have a research plan, depending on which project we're working on. I would also, if I may, mention the businesses as well. So, for example, when we were doing the Fair Work studies with the Fair Work Network, there's a very nice, it's the Oxford Internet Institute methodology, and they have a very nice system of doing a provisional scoring for the gig platforms and then going to the managers of the platforms and telling them, here, this will be published. If you do this, and that, your score will improve. So, but we do it nicely, we use, personal contacts, we use everything that is legitimate to reach these people and bring a change. So that made a difference. So before I get to policymakers, I think also change can come from the platforms themselves. Now to policymakers, what we do is we bring the results, the concerns, the requests from, the evidence-based, we do a policy brief. And then we do round tables, several of them with a lot of patients, multi-stakeholders. We bring, first of all, the workers themselves, then the civil society, if the unions are applicable, media, parliamentarians, people in government. We really reach out using our contacts to bring everyone at the university. So it is how do you say, a neutral grounds where everyone sit. We present our research results, and we have very specific suggestions. And the example on the labor law is really wonderful, because first with the market surveys, we were lucky because the academics who run this research for the National Agency for Statistics are people we know and our collaborators from AUC. So we made sure in the US, we had made sure we have the Zooms back and forth, present our research and show how this is a segment of society that is not seen. And then we were asked to put the questions, and they went through. For the policymakers, again, we did the roundtable, and we had a policy brief. And finally, the policy brief sat at the desk of someone in charge who could give a green light to the discussion of the law. So the answer is to have multi-stakeholders around the table, start by research, engage everyone early on, and it's a process. We continue to do it, and as we speak, we're doing it in other projects, with a lot of patience. So I must also say that the very first study that I did on Uber drivers, I quoted it I did it in 2017, which showed the level of education. When again, we sort of sent the study, disseminated. When it was time to have the Ride-Hailing Act in Egypt, I was really happy. It was quoted in the National Gazette, which is where the laws, the regulations, stipulations are official Gazette, not a newspaper, but the official Gazette. And it's quoted with a citation. So, it showed how the Google, how the ride sharing, should work side by side with other platforms rather than just shut it down in our context when these people are going to be out of work. So rather, we don't want to shut it down, but we want them to give better working conditions for the workers. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, another question by Sorensen, who asks, is there a risk of slipping into a type of technological solutionism by promoting fairer and more equitable AI solutions? Should we perhaps also consider that sometimes we should avoid using AI or platform technologies entirely, especially taking into account the environmental and human costs of AI infrastructure?
I wish we could, but the reality is we can't. It is not, I don't think it's a choice. I sympathize. I know the damages and the potentials, and I'm always with my students, discussing the harms that can take. I had a student present AI in politics and warfare, and it's chilling. That's an extreme. But I think the point is, I don't think we have a choice. I think it's happening whether we like it or not. And the best that we can do is understand very well the harms and be ready with the right stakeholders to push for not just mitigating the harms, but overcoming them. And also that's not only on the technical side, that's also work on the analog, like work on the regulations and work on, sometimes it's not a question of technology. As I mentioned, sometimes the discrimination or the injustice happens just on the ground, even without the technology. So we need to really be cognizant of the harms, and I wish we could work without, but I don't think it's a choice. I think it's happening whether we like it or not, but the best that we can do is really work hard to be ready, rather than being taken over by technologies that we are not prepared for.
Is there a last question? Yes, Miriam.
Thank you, Nagla, for a very interesting presentation, thought-provoking and everything. So when we come to this intersectionality and feminist lens, when you do your field work, and does it hinder you in positioning feminist lens as or are stakeholders open to endorse the feminist lens in in the kind of work you undertake, either in the research or policy advocacy, or I'm very curious to know on the ground how it's happening. Yes.
It's, I mean, thank you for the question. Very candidly, no. I think people prefer gender equality. And to be strategic, we don't use a feminist lens. And you know, I had to learn what is the difference between doing feminist work and gender equality. Feminist is more proactive. It's more confrontational. So to be strategic, honestly, what we do is we try to achieve gender equality, and we don't have to put a name. We just work on having to be proactive in resolving these issues. But again, I mean, I do know that at some point there was a move to rename a project of ours, rather than feminist, that gender equality. So what is politically correct as a nomenclature, is gender equality. But, and you're still being honest to faithful to gender equality if you are able to actually achieve the feminist solutions without necessarily having to call them feminist. You can call them anything, but you just want to have, because, I mean, how do I say, every feminist solution achieves gender equality. Okay, let's put it this way. So I'm very happy to work using the label gender equality, but feminism is more proactive, if I can distinguish the difference. We don't need to use slogans. We just want to do the work. We want to, bring equality and justice, and no one can question the principles of responsible AI. But you're right in asking, because in at least in the MENA region, I can speak at least, things can get politicized. And you want to achieve results. So as long as you're honest and transparent in the work that you do, I don't think the difference can be practical, but is more philosophical than practical. At the end of the day, if you work towards achieving gender equality and better position for women and other groups, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
I hope that answers your question. But as you quite know, you have to be strategic in how you approach matters in part of the world.
Thank you.
Right. So thank you very much again, Nagla, for your talk. And now I leave the floor to...
Can I
Yes,
just,
please.
before I leave, I just want to thank my team, because they really worked very hard to help me also with this presentation in the middle of everything else that you're doing. So it's just a moment to thank, Nada and Jessica and Khadija very much, because they were racing with me to put it all together, and I'm very grateful for them. Thank you.
So thank you to them too. And now I leave the floor to Miriam and Nagla herself to conclude our conference together these days.
So I wanted to thank everyone, participants, even those who could not make it to the paper sessions or had to apologize as a last minute for making this. I want to also thank both of you, Paula and Antonio, for believing in this happening, even on a smaller scale, just to put the momentum. It was very important. I believe that regional voices have a flavor, have a nuance to be heard, especially in research, policy making, and so on. When frankly, I attended INDL in Bologna, the international one. I'm sorry, my video won't work because I have an electricity power cut since this morning. I'm very grateful that my 4G is working and giving me some connectivity. And this is actually part of the challenges we face in the region. When you do a small search on entrepreneurship and some challenges, electricity is one of the main challenges. And the platform workers do complain a lot on social media about power cuts. So coming back again to this special INDL-MEA, my wish is to extend this to future editions, build the momentum around the chapter, along with A2K4G, which proved to be an excellent partner on the subject. Thank you again, Nagla, and the whole team. The whole team is exceptional in every way you can imagine. The speakers I have to also thank. It was really interesting to attend these keynotes of very high standard and very informative, rich content, and I hope the others also were able to benefit from these keynotes and insightful talks. So hoping to have more editions to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Let me thank you for giving me also the last word in the closing. I really appreciate our collaboration, and my deepest thanks go to Miriam, Antonio, Paula for a great partnership. Like you, I am looking forward to the next, INDL-MEA 3. And we'll make sure to extend our collaborations and with our partners in Africa to plan for the next one. I want to thank very much INDL, Ghanem, the Université d'Angers, and partners, the ILO and DiPLab. My deepest thanks also go to my dean, Dr. Sharif Kamel, who's a great supporter and just gives us green light to do the great work that we do at the center at the AUC Onsi Sawiris School of Business. I also want to thank the presenters. I was really, my students are going to do reaction papers on some of those presentations. So I'm really, it's very inspiring, and I learned from the presentation from the speakers. So I also want to acknowledge the support of my two associate directors, Nadine and Nagam, who work always in the background to give us the great support to enable us to do our great work. But really, my sincere thanks go to my team, Nada, Jessica, Khadiga, Mariz, Rinad, and Alia, for enabling me to do the great work with them. We do the great work together to be able to really do such great, challenging, and super interesting work, which doesn't feel like work. It's just fun. So thank you all. It's just an amazing, inspiring 2 days, and looking forward to the next. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Antonio, do you want to say a last word?
So yeah, it's not going to be the last word. It's going to be a word that opens up new possibilities, and it is my pleasure to just announce the 2 upcoming meetings that are connected to the INDL larger network. First of all, you will soon see on the internets, plural, the call for paper for another chapter of INDL, because we also opened a chapter in North America. So you will see that there is the call for paper for the INDL US chapter that will convene at the University of Yale, and on the 29th of April. This is a smaller one, like this conference, this workshop. And it's going to be in the flesh. It's not going to be online. And then, talking about online, we will meet again for our annual conference, the INDL 9, that will take place in Geneva at the ILO in September, more precisely from the 9th to the 11th of September. The call for paper for this will be out in January. So just look out for the 2 call for papers. Don't get the wrong one, because otherwise you will have to try and access the US during Donald Trump's administration, which is kind of a challenge. While on the other hand, accessing neutral Switzerland is relatively easier. Thank you again. I hope to meet you somewhere, either in Yale or at the ILO. Otherwise, we will meet again for INDL-MEA number 3, somewhere in 2026, somewhere in the Middle East or Africa, still to be decided, and hope to see you there. So, Paula, I don't know if you want to say something just to conclude, or just we go.
Again, a big thank you to all the contributors, the team, the speakers, keynotes and non-keynotes, the chairs, the attendees, those who asked questions and contributed to the debates. Thank you, everyone, and let's stay in touch.
Thank
Thank you very
you.
much. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Antonio and Paula.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.